A rushed Millionaire CEO bursts into the wrong women's bathroom by mistake and ends up falling in love with the unexpected woman standing in front of him. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The day started like any other for Alexander Pierce, a name that, within his towering corporate headquarters, spoke of impeccable suits, urgent phone calls, and a schedule so tightly packed that even a single pause felt like a luxury. Known to his employees simply as Mr. Pierce, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history, having taken his late father's place at only 32. His mornings were typically a blur of text messages, half-sipped espressos, and pressing questions from various departments. But on this particular morning, fate had something else in store, something that would shake the very foundations of his perfectly ordered universe. He rushed through the polished marble lobby of Pierce & Co., breezing past staff who greeted him with quick nods. His tie felt slightly askew. He adjusted it hastily, juggling a phone conversation with a board member complaining about supply chain concerns in Southeast Asia. "I'll handle it," Alexander said curtly, tapping the elevator button repeatedly as if to will the doors open faster. His reflection in the mirrored walls stared back at him. Impeccably styled hair, an expensive watch glinting on his wrist, and a hint of stress etched across his forehead. A ding signaled the elevator's arrival. Alexander stepped in and shut his eyes for a moment, bracing for another hectic day. As the elevator ascended, he mentally ran through the tasks lined up: a meeting with the CFO about quarterly earnings, a video conference with a new investor, and negotiations with an overseas partner, all before noon. Absolutely no time to waste. When the doors opened on the 18th floor, his executive level, he dashed out, mind fixed on the next urgent matter. He could feel his stomach knot with the realization that he hadn't eaten breakfast, but there was no slowing down. Not now. As he strode down the hallway toward his office, a deep ache hit him, maybe from that lack of breakfast, or perhaps from the coffee on an empty stomach. Glancing around, he spotted what he believed was the men's restroom to his right. He'd never used this particular one before, always opting for the private executive lounge. But that lounge was on the other side of the building, and he was in too much of a rush. "No time for a detour," he whispered under his breath. With his phone pressed to his ear, Alexander pushed open the door, not noticing that the sign read "Women" in bold letters. Inside it was quiet, just the faint hum of fluorescent lights. The hush was a strange contrast to his near panic as he jabbered away on the phone. A fleeting thought crossed his mind. The decor here is a bit different. Softer lighting, a more floral scent. But he shook it off, chalking it up to a remodel he hadn't had time to see. He ended the call, exhaling sharply. At least this small break would help him collect himself. That's when he heard it. A muffled sob echoing from the farthest stall. He froze. Why would a man be crying in here? The question barely had time to settle before a new wave of confusion washed over him. He glanced around quickly, noticing the lack of urinals. Horror dawned on him. He had entered the women's bathroom. His first instinct was to bolt. But then he heard the sob again, raw and trembling. Something in that sound stopped him. On any other day, he might have quietly slipped out, mortified by his error. But there was a vulnerability in that voice that tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. Slowly, and trying not to startle whoever was in there, he spoke up. "Hello? Are you okay?" No answer came, only the rustling of clothes and a frantic sniffle. With the same deliberate caution he reserved for handling delicate shareholder negotiations, Alexander stepped toward the stall. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I seem to have entered the wrong restroom, but if you need help, I can—" The stall door creaked open. A woman emerged, tears staining her cheeks. In her hand, she clutched an ultrasound image as though it were a lifeline. She was wearing the dark blue jumpsuit of the janitorial staff, Her name tag read Charlotte. Her face, though reddened from crying, was striking. Soft brown hair framed eyes that glistened with a mixture of fear and sorrow. In that moment, Alexander lost all sense of time. Here stood a woman in front of him, her sadness more palpable than any boardroom crisis he had ever faced. "Are you hurt?" he asked, noticing she was trembling. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. Instead, she held up the ultrasound, her hand shaking. Alexander, heart pounding from both embarrassment and concern, saw two distinct shapes on the sonogram. Twins. I'm sorry, Mr. Pierce," she finally whispered, voice taut with emotion. "I didn't realize you were in here." Then, biting her lip as if to hold back another flood of tears, she tried to stand straighter, as if preparing for the inevitable scolding. Alexander's gaze drifted from her face to the ultrasound. He felt a swell of questions he didn't know how to articulate. "Is everything all right?" he repeated softly, stepping aside to let her pass. His mind raced. Charlotte, she's pregnant, with twins. She's crying alone in the women's bathroom. Why? Charlotte took a shaky breath. "I lost my husband recently," she confessed, eyes darting to the floor. "And I just found out about the twins. I'm due soon." She paused, clutching the ultrasound closer. "I'm worried about losing my job." Her words spilled out in a rush as though she couldn't contain the fears that had been gnawing at her soul. "Ever since my husband died, I've been struggling, and now I can't afford to mess up. They might replace me if they find out I have complications. The medical bills. I just can't." She stopped, tears renewing their course down her cheeks. Alexander, usually so poised, felt words fail him. This was not a situation he could fix with an email or a signature. There was a human heartbeat, two, in fact, on that ultrasound, and a mother in distress. A wave of protectiveness surged through him, so unexpected that he almost didn't recognize himself. "No one's going to fire you," he said impulsively, voice edged with uncharacteristic gentleness. "Certainly not in my company." She looked up, surprise mingling with grief. "But I'm just a janitor. There are so many policies, so many people who don't want pregnant staff missing work. Her voice cracked. She stepped away, as though bracing for him to dismiss her with corporate jargon. Alexander found himself shaking his head. "I don't care what the policies say, Charlotte. You shouldn't have to cry alone." The sincerity in his own voice startled him. In that moment, a swirl of shock and tenderness pushed aside his usual guarded nature. "Please," he continued, "I know this is awkward, but can I help you in any way?" Through stifled sobs, she managed a nod. Relief and uncertainty flickered in her eyes. She was used to expecting the worst, especially from those in power. But here he was, the CEO, in the wrong restroom no less, offering kindness instead of punishment. Alexander sighed, forcing himself to speak calmly, though his mind reeled. "Let's step outside. We'll figure this out, okay?" He guided her toward the door, only to pause in comedic horror at the reminder of where he was. A faint flush crossed his cheeks. "I suppose we should leave quietly," he murmured, trying to maintain composure. "I don't want to cause you more trouble than you already have." Together they slipped out, ignoring the sidelong glances of a junior accountant who nearly dropped her files upon seeing Mr. Pierce exit the women's restroom. The hush in the hallway felt deafening. Alexander cleared his throat, turning his back on the shocked stares. "Let's talk in my office," he whispered to Charlotte, "where it's private." Charlotte hesitated, but the empathy in Alexander's gaze soothed her nervousness. She nodded, still holding the ultrasound in her trembling hands. With a protective hush, he guided her to a side elevator, using his private keycard so that they wouldn't run into too many prying eyes. While they descended to his personal suite on the 17th floor, an unexpected place for an office but one that offered him quiet and privacy, Alexander found his heart pounding in tandem with the soft hum of the elevator. Within moments, they stood in a sleek office that overlooked the city skyline. The furniture was minimalist, all glass and chrome, in stark contrast to the painful reality Charlotte carried in her small slip of paper. He gestured for her to sit on a leather couch by the window. The morning sun glinted through the glass, framing her in a gentle glow. She looked so vulnerable, and yet there was a resilience in her posture, a determination not to crumble. Alexander sat across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together as if deep in prayer. He didn't know what to say, so he offered the simplest question. "Do you have any family to help you?" Charlotte shook her head, swallowing. "No, my parents passed years ago. My in-laws moved out of the country. It's just me, and them." She glanced at the ultrasound, a flicker of bittersweet hope lighting her face. Silence lingered for a moment, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Alexander's phone vibrated on the table. Messages, calls, urgent demands from the corporate world that never paused. He ignored it. Something about Charlotte's despair made the rest of his day's agenda pale in comparison. "I can't pretend to know how you feel," he admitted, voice low. "But I want to help." She looked up, confusion mingling with gratitude. "Why?" He could only reply honestly. "Because no one should face such hardship alone. And because, if it were me, I'd want someone to reach out a hand." His own words startled him. Compassion was not new to him, but rarely had he allowed it to override the frantic demands of the company. Yet here he was, watching tears well in the eyes of a woman who, mere minutes ago, he didn't even know by name, and all he could think was that he had to do something, anything, to ease that sorrow. A soft rap on the office door startled them both. Alexander's personal assistant Karina walked in. Her usually poised demeanor faltered at the sight of Charlotte. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't realize you had company," she began, carefully placing a stack of files on the desk. "But the board meeting starts in 5 minutes. Alexander exhaled, the tension returning like a tidal wave. He rose from his seat, glancing at Charlotte. Her expression had shifted back to fear. "Don't worry," he told her gently. "This will be quick. You can wait here, or if you like, Karina can get you something to drink." Before Charlotte could respond, Karina, who possessed a discreet kindness behind her professional exterior, offered a small smile. "I'll bring you some water or tea, Ms. Charlotte, whatever you prefer." With an apologetic nod, Alexander left, heading toward the boardroom. His mind churned with worry for Charlotte, already planning how to keep her job secure. Yes, he had an entire corporation to steer, but right now, at the forefront of his thoughts, was a solitary ultrasound image, and the woman who had trembled at the thought of losing her livelihood. As he strode into the boardroom, the usual tension radiated from the faces around the polished mahogany table. The CFO frowned at him for being late. The head of marketing droned on about a potential crisis in brand perception, and the shareholders beamed in virtually, demanding updates on revenue streams. Yet all Alexander could think about was the heartbreak he'd just witnessed. A quiet voice in the back of his mind repeated a single phrase over and over. "She's carrying twins, and she's all alone." Midway through the discussion, the CFO noticed Alexander's distant stare. "Mr. Pierce," he said, "do you have any thoughts on how to remedy the supply chain issue in Asia?" Alexander cleared his throat, instantly forcing himself to focus. "Right, he began, but his voice trailed off momentarily. He caught the glances of the board members, some concerned, some perplexed. Alexander was rarely caught unprepared. "We'll form a specialized task force to handle the supply chain disruptions," he said finally, detailing a plan in the same calm, authoritative tone he'd used countless times before. Yet beneath his outward composure, his mind churned with images of Charlotte's tear-streaked face. When the meeting ended, applause broke out for his quick thinking. but Alexander felt little satisfaction. Before the others could corner him with post-meeting chatter, he hurried back to his office. He found Charlotte seated quietly, sipping tea, eyes trained on a spot on the floor as if lost in thought. He began, and she looked up. "I'd like to invite you to dinner tonight," he said, surprising even himself with the suddenness of the offer. "Just to talk more, if that's all right. I want to understand your situation better and see how else I can help." Charlotte blinked, stunned. "Dinner? With you?" He managed a faint, warm smile. "Yes, I know it's unusual, but please let me do at least that much." Her grip on the ultrasound relaxed slightly. She swallowed. "Thank you. I'm not sure what to say." Alexander exhaled, relief mingling with a surge of determination. "Then say yes," he said softly, "and let's figure it out from there." She nodded, tears gathering once more, but this time they carried a glimmer of hope. In that quiet corner of the company's executive floor, amid the hum of air conditioning and the buzzing phone calls that demanded Alexander's attention, a fragile new bond was forged, born of heartbreak, happenstance, and a shared flicker of humanity. The clock on Alexander's wall ticked toward early evening as he and Charlotte finalized their plans for dinner. She still looked stunned, brushing self-conscious fingers over her wrinkled janitorial uniform as if to remind herself this was truly happening. A sudden invitation from the company's CEO. When Alexander assured her that her attire mattered far less than her comfort, she managed a quiet, grateful smile. He told her to meet him in the ground floor lobby around 7, once her shift ended. Karina, Alexander's assistant, did her best to hide her curiosity as Charlotte left. "Reservations made for tonight, sir," Karina said, handing Alexander a slip of paper. "Chez Lumiere, your usual table is arranged." A swirl of anticipation mixed with anxiety in his chest. He rarely used that table, perched in the corner of one of the city's most elegant French restaurants, except for high-stakes investor meetings. The idea of bringing Charlotte there, the shy janitor who'd appeared in tears hours before, felt unconventional. And yet, he wanted her to see she mattered. No matter how unthinkable it might have seemed to others, offering help to Charlotte had become his priority for reasons he himself struggled to articulate. That evening, the skyscrapers glowed like beacons in the falling dusk. At the lobby's polished floor, Alexander waited, ignoring the curious stares from a few employees who lingered past their normal work hours. Before long, a figure emerged from behind a column. Charlotte, now changed into a simple blouse and skirt, her hair pulled back neatly. She approached him, still looking as though she expected to be told this was all a misunderstanding. "Hi," she said softly, hugging her purse strap. "I hope I'm not too late." Alexander smiled, gesturing for her to follow him outside. "Not at all. Are you feeling okay?" She nodded, but he noticed how her hands clutched the purse. "I'm fine," she replied. "Just not used to this." He could guess exactly what she meant, stepping into the glare of the city's nightlife in the company of a man whose name was carved onto the very building they'd just exited. A sleek car pulled up, one of the company's black sedans, tinted windows, driver in a crisp uniform. Charlotte's breath caught as Alexander opened the rear door for her. "After you." She hesitated only a moment before climbing in, eyes scanning the plush interior. Throughout the short ride, she remained politely silent, occasionally glancing out the window at the neon lights flickering across the city streets. When Alexander tried to make small talk about how she found the job, hoping to ease her nerves, she answered in quiet, halting phrases. He sensed a guardedness in her, as though life had taught her never to relax entirely, lest the next blow catch her off guard. By the time the car pulled up to Chez Lumiere, the evening sky had deepened into a rich navy. The building boasted large windows framed by twinkling fairy lights. A doorman in a crisp suit greeted them. At the sight of Alexander Pierce, he inclined his head respectfully. When his gaze flicked to Charlotte, his professional smile remained, but his brows arched, just a hint. Inside, the restaurant's atmosphere was warm and low-lit, each table adorned with a single flickering candle. A soft hum of conversation and gentle clinks of silverware provided an understated elegance. The maitre d' guided them to a secluded booth by a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city's skyline. Charlotte sat down gingerly, as if unsure whether she belonged in such a lavish setting. "Can I get you something to drink?" the maitre d' asked. Alexander glanced at Charlotte. She shook her head slightly. "Just water, please," she murmured. "2 waters," Alexander said, though the maitre d' clearly recognized he was used to a far more expansive order. Once they were alone, the hush between them felt almost delicate. Charlotte forced a smile, her hands clasped on the table. "I'm sorry. I'm sure you had 100 better things to do with your evening." "Let me decide if it's worthwhile," Alexander teased gently. "I wanted to see if you're feeling better, maybe help in whatever way I can." Her eyes darted around, no doubt noticing the crystal glasses, the well-dressed patrons. "I really appreciate it," she began, "but you don't have to—" He leaned forward, arms resting on the table. "I want to," he said, earnestness in his tone. "I meant what I said. I don't want you to worry about your job or about any lack of support. You've been through enough already, losing your husband so recently." At the mention of her loss, Charlotte's composure wavered. She took a shaky breath. "He passed away in an accident 8 weeks ago," she admitted, her gaze lowering. We were barely stable financially, and now with the twins—" She stopped, voice catching. Alexander's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He wasn't sure what else to say, so he let the sincerity of his voice speak for him. "How far along are you?" She placed a hand over her abdomen, the small curve subtle beneath her blouse. "Almost 5 months. The doctors said everything looks normal, but it's a high-risk pregnancy because—" Her voice trailed off. She swallowed. "Because I'm alone now. Because my finances are unstable. Because it's twins." She shrugged bitterly, as if trying to brush off her own fears. For a moment, they let the quiet settle. The waiter appeared, delivering water and menus. With impeccable timing, he recited the specials for the evening. Charlotte blinked at the fancy dish names, coq au vin, bouillabaisse, and others with rolling French pronunciations. Alexander opened his mouth to order, but then paused, turning to Charlotte. "Anything catch your eye?" he asked softly. She looked at the menu as though it were written in an alien language. "I'm not sure," she confessed. "I've never eaten at a place like this. Maybe something simple?" Alexander closed the menu with a reassuring nod. "We'll keep it low-key. Let me handle it," he said, then requested a mild fish dish, a vegetable soup, and fresh bread, foods he hoped wouldn't upset her stomach. As the waiter departed, Charlotte exhaled. "I don't mean to sound ungrateful, it's just, this is all so overwhelming." He reached across the table, gently placing his hand near hers, not quite touching. "I understand," he said. "I was worried you might feel that way, but you aren't obligated to me. I'm not expecting anything in return. I just want to be sure you have what you need. Good prenatal care. Time off if you need it. We can arrange paid leave, whatever it takes." Her brow furrowed. She seemed torn between hope and wariness. "Would you really do that for me? Someone you barely know?" Alexander hesitated, picking his words carefully. "It's not about how well I know you," he explained. "It's about what's right. If my company can't take care of its own employees, especially someone in your situation, then what's the point? Besides," he added, voice quieter, "I've spent so many years in boardrooms and negotiations, always chasing the next deal. Maybe it's time I learned to pay attention to the people right under my nose." She looked at him then, really looked at him, a slight crease forming on her forehead. "You're different than I expected." He let out a half laugh, half sigh. "How so?" Charlotte blushed. "I guess I thought someone like you, a CEO, a person with all that influence and money, that you'd be cold, detached." He nodded, acknowledging the stereotype. "I think I was to some extent, but life has a funny way of reminding you what matters." He paused, then gently changed the subject. "Do you have any medical appointments coming up?" "Next week," she replied. "They want to do more detailed scans." She glanced down at her glass, swirling the water with a hint of nerves. "I'm honestly terrified. My job is physically demanding, and if I get put on bed rest—" "You won't lose your salary," Alexander interrupted, unwavering. "I'll make sure of it." Her eyes brimmed with relief, a weight visibly lifting from her posture. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the waiter arrived with their first course, a delicate soup that filled the air with a savory aroma. Alexander waited until the waiter left before continuing. "Eat," he said kindly. "We'll keep talking afterward." Charlotte sipped her soup, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. Moments passed as they both tried the dishes, the conversation drifting to lighter topics. The strangest thing Alexander had seen at an overseas business conference. The friend Charlotte used to confide in who'd moved away. They even laughed a little at the idea of him barging into the women's bathroom, an incident that hours ago had spelled total embarrassment for both of them. Between bites, he caught glimpses of her features, the faint freckles on her nose, the way her eyes crinkled when she gave a timid smile. Something in her vulnerability resonated with him, stirring a protectiveness he'd never quite felt before. When the main course arrived, tender fish and gently seasoned vegetables, Alexander steered the conversation back to practical matters. "Do you have a decent place to stay? Enough space for 2 babies?" She shrugged, a sadness creeping into her expression again. "I'm in a tiny apartment. It was all we could afford even before my husband passed. It's not in a nice area. I worry about safety." Alexander placed his fork down, his mind already racing with possible solutions. "That might be something we can address. The company has partnerships with housing programs. We might find a better arrangement, just temporarily at least, until you're on your feet." Tears threatened again, but this time a warmth of gratitude replaced the anguish. "Thank you," she whispered, voice quivering with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever repay you." He shook his head. "It's not a debt," he said gently. "It's just the right thing. You focus on staying healthy for the twins." A comfortable hush fell between them. Outside, the city lights shimmered. Inside the restaurant, more diners bustled in, the gentle buzz of conversation growing. A distant violin melody played over the speakers. Charlotte stared at her plate for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I keep thinking about my husband," she admitted softly. "He was so excited about being a father. He had all these plans. And then, just like that, he was gone." Her voice caught. "Some days I feel numb. Other days I'm just terrified I'll mess this up without him." Alexander's eyes reflected compassion. "I can't pretend to fill that loss," he said. "But you're not alone. There are people, like me, who will gladly support you." He spoke the words carefully, almost tasting the responsibility they implied. "You've been strong, Charlotte, stronger than most people realize." Their gazes locked, and in that moment, the difference in their social stations melted away. No CEO, no janitor, just 2 people, each with their own heartbreaks and hopes, forging an unusual connection over a candle-lit dinner. Then the waiter appeared again, asking if they'd like dessert. Charlotte cast a nervous glance at Alexander. "I really should get going," she murmured. "It's late, and I have an early shift tomorrow." He nodded in understanding. "Of course, let's get the check." Within minutes, they were stepping back onto the sidewalk, the sedan pulling up once more to whisk them away. The restaurant's golden sign glowed behind them, and the night air felt surprisingly cool. As they slid into the back seat, Alexander gave the driver instructions to drop Charlotte at her apartment first. She seemed relieved and touched that he remembered her earlier mention of her address. During the ride, they spoke in hushed voices, the city lights blurring past the windows. She looked exhausted, yet calmer, as though some unspoken burden had lifted. At last, they reached her place, a modest building with flickering overhead lights by the entrance. "Thank you," she said, her hand on the door handle. Before stepping out, she turned back to face him. "Not just for the dinner, but for everything. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but tonight, I feel hopeful for the first time in a while." Alexander's breath caught at the emotion behind her words. He reached out, gently squeezing her hand. "You can call me any time," he said, offering a business card with his personal number scrawled on the back. It was a far cry from the printed corporate ones. This was handwritten, more personal. "I'll have Karina arrange some details for work accommodations, and we'll talk again soon, all right?" She nodded, eyes shining with gratitude. "All right." The car door shut, and Charlotte walked to the apartment entrance. Alexander lingered, waiting until she disappeared safely inside. Something in his heart twisted, an ache of concern and a flicker of something else he couldn't quite name. In a single day, this woman, with her quiet demeanor and heartbreaking circumstances, had altered his routine-driven life. As the sedan pulled away, he gazed at the city's skyline, mind replaying her every word, her tears, and that ultrasound image. Somewhere in the swirl of urban lights, deals, and deadlines, he realized he was stepping onto an entirely new path, one that refused to be confined to the safe lines he'd drawn around his life. He thought back to the moment in the women's restroom, a second's chance that changed his perspective. Fate, coincidence, or something else entirely? He didn't know. But as the car sped toward his upscale condo, he resolved to face the next day with renewed purpose. Charlotte would not walk this path alone, and, unexpectedly, he discovered he didn't want to walk away either. Alexander woke earlier than usual the next morning, an uneasy energy coursing through him. Typically, he embraced a regimented routine: alarm at 5, quick workout, black coffee, and then a straight shot to the office. But on this day, he paused before leaving his penthouse. Staring out at the city from his glass walls, he could feel the weight of the previous evening's encounter: Charlotte's story, her tears, and his own promise to help. It unsettled him in a way that high-stakes negotiations never had. Yet it also lit a spark of determination inside him, a sense of purpose that made him want to be at the office far earlier than usual, ready to set changes in motion. Traffic was light. He arrived at Pearson Copley just as dawn broke, the building's massive lobby nearly empty. Only a few cleaners, Charlotte's peers, worked quietly, their footsteps echoing over the polished tiles. He nodded a polite greeting, resisting the urge to scan for her face among them. She was almost certainly still asleep, or at least he hoped she was. She needed rest. He headed straight to his office, passing Karina's desk. Naturally, his assistant wasn't in yet, so Alexander brewed his own coffee in the private kitchenette. Sitting down at his expansive desk, he began drafting notes on what needed to be done: steps to ensure Charlotte's maternity leave was paid, phone calls to the company's HR department, the possibility of relocating her to a safer part of town, and, he hesitated here, a personal pledge to cover any medical expenses insurance might not handle. He wasn't sure how to formalize that last piece without it seeming like an overreach, but he wrote it down anyway. By 7:30, Karina arrived, eyebrows lifting when she saw him already engrossed in work. "Early start, sir," she commented, placing a stack of new reports on his desk. "You're usually here by 8, but never this early." Alexander set his pen aside. "Karina, I need a meeting with HR," he said, tapping the notes he'd just compiled. I want to talk about our policies for pregnant employees, specifically about extended benefits. Karina blinked. Yes, of course. Shall I arrange it now? Mr. Lopez from HR typically arrives around 9. Please do, Alexander replied. Then he remembered Charlotte might show up for her shift soon, and he wanted to catch her before she started working. Also, if you see Charlotte, the janitor, let me know. She might come to the 18th floor for cleaning at some point. Karina scribbled a note, her expression carefully neutral. Over the years, she'd learned not to pry into Alexander's personal initiatives. Of course, she murmured. Anything else? That's all for now, he said, leaning back in his chair. Thank you. She left, and Alexander turned to the sprawling view outside his window. The city was fully awake now, cars inching along, people heading to their daily routines. In just a few minutes, he would begin a routine of his own, finalizing a significant contract with an international partner. The day's schedule was no less packed than before, but overshadowing it was the conversation he needed to have with HR, one that he knew might raise a few eyebrows, especially since it concerned a single employee. He wanted to ensure no official blowback came to Charlotte from the higher-ups. Board members, especially those fixated on the bottom line, often took issue with costly exceptions, but Alexander was determined to push forward. He'd inherited this company. It was his to mold. He refused to let bureaucracy overshadow basic compassion. Shortly after 9, Karina poked her head in. HR is ready for you, Mr. Pierce. Conference room B. Alexander snapped his laptop shut and strode down the corridor. The swirling anxieties in his chest rose. On the surface, he would approach them calmly, as always. But beneath that calm, he carried the memory of Charlotte's trembling voice, remembering how close she'd been to losing hope. Inside conference room B, Mr. Lopez stood adjusting his tie. He was a middle-aged man with a careful smile and the posture of someone who measured his every word. He extended a hand. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce. You wanted to discuss an urgent matter?" "Good morning," Alexander replied, shaking Mr. Lopez's hand before taking a seat. "Yes, indeed. Let's talk about our policies for maternity leave, especially for employees who might need additional support." Mr. Lopez nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Are we looking at a department-wide policy shift, or is this regarding a specific case?" The question was direct. Alexander cleared his throat, deciding it was pointless to dance around specifics. "There's an employee, Charlotte. She's part of our janitorial staff. She recently lost her husband, is pregnant with twins, and is understandably worried about job security." He paused. "I want to ensure she has paid leave if she's put on bed rest or if her doctor recommends she limit physical labor. Also, if she needs extra time post-delivery, we should provide it without risking her position." Mr. Lopez took out a notepad. "We do have standard maternity leave policies, typically 6 weeks paid for full-time employees, extended to 12 with partial pay. However, janitorial staff are usually hired under a different bracket of benefits, particularly if they're contracted through a partner agency. I'll have to check if she's a direct hire or under the agency." Alexander's face tightened. He hadn't even considered that some of the janitorial team might be outsourced. "And if she is under the agency?" Lopez offered a cautious shrug. "Then technically she falls under their policies, not Pierce & Co.'s. We might not have direct control, although we could request special allowances. Sometimes that means extra red tape and negotiations." "Then I want that red tape cut," Alexander said, unwavering. "If need be, we'll absorb her as a direct employee to ensure she's covered. I'm prepared to do what's necessary. Understood?" Lopez blinked, clearly surprised at the force in Alexander's voice, but he nodded. "Yes, sir. We can explore a direct hire arrangement. It might mean additional costs and potentially could raise questions from the board if we do it for one individual. They might ask why." "Let them ask," Alexander replied, leaning forward. "We'll handle it. Just make it happen, Lopez. Keep it discreet, but do it quickly." A flicker of discomfort passed over Lopez's features. "All right, I'll get the paperwork moving." Alexander ended the meeting shortly after, satisfied with the initial steps. He had no time to waste. There were calls to make, a team to meet, and negotiations to finalize. Yet in the back of his mind, he kept revisiting Charlotte's face. Every few minutes he caught himself checking if Karina had left any note about Charlotte's whereabouts. It wasn't until nearly noon that Karina buzzed in. "Sir, Charlotte is on the 18th floor cleaning the corridor near accounting. Shall I ask her to wait?" Alexander felt relief and nerves in equal measure. "Yes, please. Ask her to wait in the lounge by the elevator. I'll be right there." He excused himself from a call with a European partner, ignoring the slightly irked expression on the CFO's face, and walked swiftly down the hallway. Just as Karina had said, Charlotte stood near a small seating area, holding a cleaning rag and a spray bottle. The overhead lights cast a soft glow on her, emphasizing her tired eyes. At the sight of Alexander, she tensed, unsure if she should smile or brace herself for something else. "Charlotte," he greeted, voice quieter than usual. "Hello. How are you feeling?" She gave a polite nod, setting down her cleaning supplies. "I'm all right. I didn't expect you to ask for me." She sounded both shy and anxious. He glanced around to ensure no passers-by were eavesdropping. "I wanted to talk about some steps we're taking. Let's sit down in my office for a moment, if that's okay." He saw the flicker of worry in her eyes. "It's good news, I promise. Nothing for you to fear." She exhaled, shoulders relaxing. "Yes. Okay." Once inside his glass-walled office, Alexander gently shut the door. He gestured for her to take a seat on the small leather sofa. She perched on the edge, posture stiff, as if ready to leap up at any sign of trouble. He sat across from her. "First," he began, trying to keep his tone casual, "I spoke with HR. We're going to ensure you get full pay while you're on maternity leave or if your doctor puts you on partial bed rest. That's non-negotiable." Her eyes went round, tears threatening to form again. "But how?" she asked softly. "No," he cut in, gentle but firm. "You're an employee. You're part of this company. I won't have you worrying about finances. We'll finalize the details in the coming days. Until then, let your supervisor know if you feel any physical strain and we'll reduce your workload immediately." Charlotte stared at him for a long moment, face a mixture of disbelief and enormous relief. She gave a shaky nod, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what to say." He smiled, though there was compassion in his eyes. "You don't need to say anything. Just stay healthy." For a moment, they lapsed into silence. Through the office windows, they could see lines of employees hustling by, phones pressed to ears, lives moving at full speed. But in that quiet bubble, it was just them, sharing a sense of solace. Then she found her voice. "I'm still so overwhelmed. Everything happened so fast," she said. "Last night's dinner feels like a dream. Now you're giving me a chance to breathe. I just can't quite believe it." Alexander shifted, tempted to close the distance between them, but opting instead for a respectful posture. "It's real," he assured her, "and it doesn't stop there. I also want to help you find a safer apartment if you're willing. The place you're staying—" He recalled the dim lighting and cracked sidewalks from the night before. "It worries me, especially once the babies arrive." She stared at her lap, fingers tangling nervously. "I'm not sure I can afford moving costs on my own." He shook his head. "I'm prepared to offer you a stipend. Initially, at least, until you're settled." Her head snapped up, eyes widening. "But that's a lot. You hardly know me, Mr. Pierce. Why would you do that?" He weighed her words. It was the question that hung between them, the one he'd asked himself a dozen times. "Because I can," he said at last, and because you deserve a chance. Do you think if your husband were alive I'd do any less? The difference is just circumstance." He paused, letting that sink in. "I want to do this. No hidden motives, no strings attached." Charlotte exhaled, trembling. I'm not sure how to handle kindness like this. I'm used to always being on guard." His eyes softened. "Then maybe it's time to let your guard down a little." A slow nod was her only response. She pressed a palm to her belly as if reassuring the unborn twins that they were safe. "I'll try," she said. "Thank you." Alexander rose, anxiety returning as he glanced at the time. He had a conference call scheduled to start in less than 5 minutes. "I hate to rush, but I have to get on a business call. Are you okay? Do you need anything else?" She stood as well, shaking her head. "No, I'll be fine, really. You've done enough for a lifetime. Let me just go back to work, I guess. Thank you again." He watched her gather her cleaning supplies, though he felt a pang at the thought of her continuing manual labor while pregnant with twins. "Please remember," he said gently, "if you ever feel unwell, come straight here or to Karina. We'll make sure you rest." She offered a grateful smile, then quietly slipped out. Alexander remained in place for a few seconds, listening to her footsteps fade. In the corridor, he could see her pass Karina's desk. Karina offered Charlotte a small nod of encouragement, a sign that Alexander wasn't alone in wanting to help. Steadying himself, Alexander hurried back to his seat, plugging in the headset for the imminent conference call. But as the lines connected, as voices from across the globe greeted him with talk of investments and expansions, his mind drifted. He thought about how Charlotte had pressed her hand against her abdomen, protectively, instinctively. He pictured the future that lay ahead for her, doctor visits, eventually giving birth, raising twins alone. His resolve to help solidified further, as unshakable as any corporate vision he'd ever championed. That afternoon, the pace of work soared. Alexander plowed through meetings, hammered out a new contract, and fielded frantic questions from a major supplier. By day's end, he felt mentally drained, yet oddly satisfied. The outlines of a plan were coming together. He even jotted down a short list of neighborhoods near the company that might be suitable for Charlotte, safe, close to public transit, or even near daycare facilities. Later, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and the glow of office lights replaced the natural daylight, Karina knocked softly on his door. "Long day, sir," she said in an understanding tone, handing him an updated schedule for tomorrow. "Is there anything else I can do before I go?" He scanned the schedule, noticing he had a block of free time around midday. "Yes, please set up an appointment with a reputable realtor for that free slot. We're looking at possible housing options." Karina nodded, smiling discreetly. She'd pieced together enough to realize who the arrangement was for. "I'll handle it first thing tomorrow." As she left, Alexander leaned back in his chair. The city lights sparkled outside, matching the swirl of determination inside him. He remembered Charlotte's words, "I'm not sure how to handle kindness like this." That admission struck him at his core, reminding him how precarious many people's lives were, how a single tragedy could rob them of their security, their hope. Alexander set aside the paperwork, unable to concentrate any longer. Gathering his coat, he made his way to the elevator. As he rode down to the lobby, he reflected that in the last few years, success had become his constant companion, while compassion, in any personal sense, had been relegated to the back seat. Perhaps that was changing now, and for reasons he could only partially comprehend. The lobby was quiet, only a few staff heading home. Outside, the air felt crisp. Alexander inhaled deeply, a small smile tugging at his lips. He could feel the faint stir of excitement at the thought that each step he took would help Charlotte stand on firmer ground. And maybe, in a way he was only beginning to understand, the process would reshape him too, teaching him that success measured by stock values and corporate expansions meant little if it didn't touch actual human lives. He walked toward his waiting sedan, a plan forming in his mind. Tomorrow, he'd push forward. He'd talk to the realtor, sign whatever was necessary, and ensure Charlotte had a path to something better. If the board raised questions, he'd handle it. If the HR red tape doubled, he'd cut through it again. For once, he felt unstoppable, driven not by profit margins but by a deeper conviction. As he slid into the back seat of the car and closed the door, the driver greeted him politely, but Alexander barely heard it. He glanced up at the towering building, lights flickering in a pattern that reminded him of the unsung employees laboring there day and night. Then he shut his eyes, letting the hum of the engine calm him, vowing that the next day would be one of action, of changing a life for the better. And the two tiny lives growing inside Charlotte, his mind kept drifting to that ultrasound image, so fragile, so full of potential. She had once feared losing it all. Now, if he had any say, she would gain more than she'd ever dreamed possible. He'd do everything in his power to see it through. Morning light spilled across Alexander's desk, illuminating a neat stack of new proposals awaiting his review. Despite the workload, his thoughts were already drifting elsewhere, to a midday meeting with a realtor and the possibility of finding Charlotte a safer place to live. It was only 8 o'clock, but he felt the hours rushing by, as if each minute were a countdown to a promise he was determined to keep. He switched on his computer, quickly typing out emails for his department heads. His focus flickered between each screen: marketing reports, financial analyses, strategic proposals. Yet beneath his usual corporate efficiency, an undercurrent of anticipation hummed. By mid-morning he glanced at the clock, mentally willing time to move faster. Karina walked in precisely at 9, as she often did, with a fresh coffee in hand and an update on the day's schedule. "Good morning, sir," she said, setting the cup carefully on the desk. "Your meeting with the realtor is confirmed for 12:30. They'll meet you in the lobby." Alexander thanked her, then paused, tapping a pen against his notepad. "Any word from HR about Charlotte's direct hire paperwork?" he asked softly, mindful of the glass walls that could carry sound too easily. Karina checked her tablet. "Mr. Lopez sent an update. The documents are nearly finalized. They just need your signature. Once that's done, she'll be officially on the company payroll with full employee benefits." She looked up, adding in a gentler tone, "It should be ready by tomorrow." He exhaled in relief. "That's good. Really good." Karina offered a small smile. She knew how much this meant to him, though he'd never spoken about it outright. She handed him the day's briefing notes and left, her footsteps quiet on the carpet. A swirl of satisfaction warmed Alexander's chest. By tomorrow, Charlotte would have ironclad job security. No more fear of losing her position if she needed to rest. His phone buzzed. Yet another meeting request from a board member. Leaning back in his chair, he mentally steeled himself. The board's concerns about cost-cutting measures often clashed with his current philanthropic leanings, but if they pressed him, he'd handle it. For now, he had a bigger personal mission. His first few hours flew by in a flurry of spreadsheets and conference calls. The CFO asked urgent questions about the upcoming quarterly statement. The head of operations demanded clarity on a new tech integration. Each conversation was a tightrope, but Alexander navigated them with practiced poise. Yet every so often, between calls, he found himself checking the time. Finally, it was 12:15. He closed a meeting early and hurried toward the elevator. On the way, he caught a glimpse of Charlotte in the hallway, wiping down the glass partitions near the marketing section. She looked up just as he passed, and their eyes met briefly. He gave a reassuring nod and she returned a tiny smile before continuing her work. In the lobby, the realtor, Jacqueline White, waited by the grand reception area, a leather portfolio in hand. She was a poised woman in her 40s, with a confident demeanor that suggested she'd closed countless deals in her career. When she spotted Alexander, her face lit with a courteous smile. "Mr. Pierce, a pleasure to finally meet in person," she said. I've curated a few listings in safe, convenient neighborhoods, as you requested. Shall we take your car, or do you prefer mine? We can take mine, Alexander replied. I have a company driver waiting. We'll have more privacy to talk while we drive. They stepped outside into the bustling midday crowd. Alexander's sedan slid up to the curb, and he opened the door for Jacqueline before settling into the back seat. As the car pulled away, he explained his requirements succinctly. We're looking for a 2-bedroom, ideally with decent security and easy access to local clinics. Public transportation is important too. Jacqueline nodded, flipping through her tablet. I have 3 prime candidates. One is in the Pinewood complex about 10 minutes from your headquarters with gated security. Another is in a newly renovated set of apartments near Riverside. It's a bit farther, but extremely safe. The third is slightly older, but has a strong neighborhood community. They spent the ride discussing amenities, lease terms, and potential budget constraints. Jacqueline, accustomed to high-profile clients, began pressing for specifics. Is this for a friend or an employee, Mr. Pierce? Alexander paused. He wasn't accustomed to explaining his private affairs to realtors, but he realized some clarity might help. She's an employee, going through a difficult time, and I'd like to support her transition. He kept the details minimal. Jacqueline's eyes flickered with polite interest. I see. In that case, perhaps the Pinewood complex might be best. The management is flexible about lease co-signing if your employee has limited credit history. You mentioned you'd assist financially? Yes, I'll be covering deposits, at least initially, he confirmed. Mind already picturing Charlotte stepping through a safe, well-lit hallway at night, not the dim stairwell of her current place. They visited the first option at Pinewood, a mid-rise building with a modest but welcoming lobby, complete with a security desk. The manager recognized Alexander Pierce immediately, greeting him with an eager handshake. He led them to a unit on the second floor. 2 bedrooms with a small living area and a neat kitchenette. The carpeting was new, the walls freshly painted in soft cream tones, and the wide windows allowed ample sunlight. Alexander walked through each room carefully, evaluating it from Charlotte's perspective. He pictured a crib in the spare bedroom, maybe some soft decor to make it cozy. The manager explained that the neighborhood was family-friendly, featuring a nearby park and a grocery store within walking distance. It's quite secure, the manager assured. Cameras on every floor, a guard at the entrance. We have quiet hours at night, which many families appreciate. Alexander nodded, turning to Jacqueline. This is very promising. Let's keep this one in mind. I'd like to see the others, just to be sure. The second property, near Riverside, was sleeker, more modern, with higher-end finishes. However, it was also pricier, and at least 20 minutes from Pierce & Co. is in moderate traffic, potentially doubling Charlotte's commute. The building boasted a rooftop terrace, a small gym, and a play area for kids. But Alexander worried about how draining a longer ride might be, especially once Charlotte was heavily pregnant or juggling newborns. Jacqueline noted his hesitation. The apartments here are top-notch, but yes, it may not be as convenient as Pinewood, she acknowledged. The third option was an older building in a stable neighborhood. Although the listing boasted good security, the hallways looked dim and dated, and the unit itself felt cramped. One bedroom was barely large enough for a single bed, let alone the twin cribs Charlotte would eventually need. No elevator either. That alone posed a potential challenge given Charlotte's high-risk pregnancy. Alexander shook his head politely. Not ideal, he murmured. They ended the tour back at Pinewood, deciding to review the paperwork. It's safe, well-maintained, and near the office, Alexander summarized. I think this might be our best bet. If I place a deposit, how soon can the tenant move in? The manager smiled, glancing at the date on his phone. We have immediate availability. Once we sign the lease, she can move in almost right away, assuming it aligns with your arrangement. Alexander breathed a small sigh of relief. Excellent. They returned to the car, and Jacqueline scrolled through her tablet once more. I'll prepare the lease documents and email them to you by tomorrow. We can finalize the details then." He thanked her, and by 1:30, they were back at Pierce & Co.'s lobby. "I appreciate your efficiency," he told Jacqueline as she climbed out. "That's what I'm here for," she replied with a professional nod. "I'll be in touch soon." Alexander's driver pulled away, leaving him at the curb. He checked his watch. There was still half an hour before his next meeting. Enough time, perhaps, to catch Charlotte on her lunch break, if she even took one. He remembered how she'd once told him she sometimes skipped breaks to finish cleaning faster. Taking the elevator up, he dropped by Karina's desk. "Could you check if Charlotte is on a lunch break?" he asked. Karina typed a quick message on her computer and received a reply from the maintenance supervisor. Charlotte was in the staff break room on the 12th floor. With a quick thanks, Alexander headed there. The staff break room was a modest space with plastic chairs and vending machines, typically used by lower-level employees who didn't have private lounge access. He paused at the door, adjusting his tie, aware of how his presence might raise eyebrows. Then he pushed it open. Inside, a few employees were chatting quietly. On the far side, Charlotte sat alone at a table, a half-eaten sandwich on a paper plate in front of her. She looked up in surprise, quickly standing as if unsure how to greet him in front of her peers. "Mr. Pierce?" she said politely, her voice betraying both respect and lingering shyness. Alexander offered a kind smile, keeping his tone casual. "Don't get up. Mind if I join you for a moment?" Her co-workers watched this exchange with silent curiosity. One or two rose, mumbling about needing to get back to work, likely not wanting to linger with the CEO present. Soon it was just the two of them at the table. Charlotte lowered herself back into her seat, cheeks slightly flushed. "Of course," she replied, her gaze flicking around to see if anyone else was eavesdropping. He settled into the chair across from her. "I've been out looking at apartments during lunch," he explained, leaning in so she could hear his lowered voice. "Found one not too far from here. Safe, clean, a 2-bedroom. I think it could be perfect for you." Her eyes widened, excitement mixing with a hint of apprehension. "Already? That was so quick." "I don't want you waiting any longer than you have to," he said gently. "I know how difficult it can be, worrying about where you'll live. This place would be a major improvement. Pinewood Complex. Have you heard of it?" Charlotte shook her head. "No, but I'm sure it's better than where I am now." She hesitated, folding her hands in her lap. "Mr. Pierce, I appreciate this more than you know, but does it cost more than I can afford?" She swallowed, bracing herself. He considered how best to phrase it. "It's definitely pricier than your current place, but I'm going to cover the deposit and the first few months' rent while you transition. Then, once the twins are here and you're settled back to work, we'll figure out a manageable plan for you to gradually take over if you want. No rush, though." Tears gathered in her eyes, but she managed to keep them from falling. The corners of her mouth trembled. I don't know how to thank you." Alexander reached across, resting his hand lightly atop hers. "You don't owe me anything," he repeated. "Really, think of it as bridging the gap until life stabilizes. You have enough on your plate." Charlotte nodded, lips pressed together to keep her composure. "You're changing everything," she whispered, and he could sense the depth of her emotion. "I thought I'd have to struggle alone forever." He squeezed her hand gently. "Not anymore." A hush followed, each word sinking in. In the quiet break room, the vending machine's hum was the only background noise. Through the window, sunlight streamed in, highlighting the faint lines of worry on Charlotte's face, lines that he hoped would soften with relief once she realized just how supported she was. After a moment, she inhaled shakily, pulling her hand back to wipe her eyes. "When can I see it?" she asked, voice still unsteady. "As soon as the paperwork's ready," he said. "We might even manage it tomorrow or the next day, depending on how fast the manager finalizes the lease. I can go with you if you'd like, or arrange for a key so you can check it out." She offered a timid smile. "I'd feel better if you were there the first time." I don't know anything about dealing with realtors and buildings like that. I'll probably get confused." He returned her smile, a warm wave of protectiveness brimming in him. "Then let's plan to do it together," he said. "I'll clear my schedule. Just let me know when you're free. I don't want to force you to give up your shift, though. I can coordinate with your supervisor." Charlotte swallowed, still blinking back tears. "I'll ask them for some time off. It's worth it," she said softly, a small laugh escaping in spite of her tears. "I can't believe we're discussing me moving to a decent place, a safe place." Alexander glanced at the clock on the wall, 1:45. He had a meeting in 15 minutes, but he hated to end the conversation on a rushed note. Still, he also wanted her to be at ease before he left. "You'll be safe. Let's keep it that way. After we finalize everything, you can focus on your pregnancy without added stress." She nodded, letting out a breath that trembled with suppressed emotion. "Thank you," she said for what felt like the 100th time. But Alexander sensed every repetition came from an even deeper well of gratitude. "I won't let you down." He stood, giving her a nod of reassurance. "You never could," he said gently. "I'll touch base later, all right? If you have any questions, anything at all, just come see me or Karina." Charlotte watched him go, her expression caught between amazement and a fragile sort of relief. Alexander stepped out into the hallway, noticing a few employees had wandered back to the break room door, likely curious about their conversation. He paid them no mind. Gossip mattered little to him right now. His only concern was ensuring Charlotte's well-being. The rest of his day progressed in a whirlwind of corporate dealings. By the time he returned to his desk, it was nearly 6. The emails had piled up and multiple phone calls awaited him. Still, a persistent flicker of optimism underpinned his busy day. He was finalizing a small miracle for someone who needed it more than she'd ever admit. As dusk settled outside and the office emptied, Alexander stayed late, drafting a personal note to the property manager at Pinewood. He wanted to ensure all was in order. Then he wrote an email to Karina, listing the steps for Charlotte's direct hire paperwork and any additional coverage for her medical appointments. The last item on his to-do list was to email Mr. Lopez to confirm the changes to her employment contract. He wrote, "Mr. Lopez, please expedite the direct hire arrangement for Charlotte. She'll need immediate confirmation, so her healthcare benefits are updated. Ensure no departmental delays. If any arise, send them to me directly. Thank you, A. Pierce." He hit send, feeling a rush of satisfaction that rivaled any corporate victory. Yes, he was well aware that some colleagues might whisper about favoritism, but in the quiet of his high-rise office with the city lights twinkling outside, he felt a conviction more profound than any strategic business deal. He thought of Charlotte's face in the break room, the timid hope shimmering in her eyes, and of the ultrasound picture she clutched so protectively. The notion of helping her secure a stable future, even in this small way, kindled a sense of purpose that he rarely found in board meetings. Gathering his coat, Alexander walked to the elevator, mind drifting to the next steps. The lease, the move-in, ensuring the furniture and utilities were squared away so Charlotte wouldn't have to lift a finger. He'd likely have to quell her protests at some point. She was proud, and though grateful, he sensed she'd insist she didn't want to be a burden. But if there was any pushback, he'd remind her that every penny spent was an investment in not just her future, but the twins as well. As the elevator descended, he closed his eyes, imagining the day Charlotte would walk into that bright apartment, feeling safe enough to breathe easy, to rest properly, and maybe, just maybe, to believe that life could offer new beginnings even after tragic loss. He stepped out into the lobby, the polished floors reflecting the overhead lights. With purposeful strides, he exited the building, the cool night air enveloping him. A sense of calm washed over him, the kind that accompanies doing something genuinely good for another human being. Yes, tomorrow would bring more questions and more tasks, He'd have to weave through corporate politics and personal boundaries alike. But for now, he let himself savor the moment. A tiny part of him thrilled at the thought that in helping Charlotte, he might also be changing himself. "Driver," he said quietly, settling into the back seat of his sedan, "take me home, please." As the city's neon glow rushed by the windows, Alexander leaned back, a faint smile lingering on his lips. The day was done, but the future had never seemed more open. Already he was counting the hours until the next morning, eager to push forward with a plan that transcended any corporate strategy he'd ever devised, and that, for once, left him feeling truly alive. Alexander's day began with a rush of emails and calls, much like any other. But beneath the predictable corporate motions lay a sense of excitement he couldn't quite disguise. He kept glancing at his phone, expecting an update from either the realtor or HR. Even as he discussed market expansion strategies with the CFO, part of his mind remained fixed on Charlotte, her new apartment, the finalization of her direct hire status, and the quiet gratitude in her voice when she spoke of the twins. By mid-morning, Karina knocked on his office door, a thick sheaf of documents in her arms. He motioned for her to enter, finishing up a phone conversation with a European client. As he ended the call, Karina stepped forward, offering a small smile. "Mr. Lopez from HR dropped these off," she explained, placing the paperwork on his desk. "It's Charlotte's transfer into direct employment. Her new benefits package, an updated contract, all the official details." Her tone was calm, but there was a hint of satisfaction in her eyes, as if she, too, felt proud that the process had gone so quickly. Alexander exhaled with relief. "That's excellent. I'll read them over now. Is Mr. Lopez available if I need to confirm anything?" Karina consulted her tablet. "He's in meetings all morning, but he said he'd clear his schedule if you want to sign before noon." She paused. "He also mentioned you might need to talk to the board's finance committee if any concerns about cost arise." Alexander accepted the papers. "Understood. If the committee has questions, they can bring them to me directly." His voice carried a firm edge. He'd prepared for possible friction. Some board members would inevitably ask why a single janitorial employee was receiving these special accommodations. But he had more than enough authority and moral conviction to handle that. Once Karina left, he began sifting through the pages, standard disclaimers, revised health benefits, a section for extended maternity leave, and a clause ensuring that if Charlotte needed early bed rest, she wouldn't lose a day's pay. He nodded in approval. Mr. Lopez had followed instructions well. No half measures, no back doors that might jeopardize her security. He scanned for potential pitfalls. Everything seemed in order. Satisfied, he gathered a pen and signed wherever indicated, occasionally scribbling a note for further clarification. Then he typed a quick message to Mr. Lopez. "Lopez, I've signed everything. Thank you for expediting this. Let's confirm the effective date is immediate. A. Pierce." Leaning back in his chair, Alexander let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. In a single stroke, he'd ensured that Charlotte would have the same protections as any corporate staffer, and more, if she needed them. The usual tangle of monthly earnings reports and future expansions felt dim by comparison. This was tangible, life-changing work, and he couldn't hide the quiet thrill it gave him. He rose, walked to the window, and stared at the city spread out beneath the morning sun. Skyscrapers glinted, people hurried along sidewalks far below, all following their own invisible narratives. Perhaps all those stories were just as urgent, just as fraught with personal stakes as Charlotte's. He realized with a twist of humility how rarely he paused to consider them. His reflection in the glass looked thoughtful, almost wistful. Then, with a decisive nod, he turned away to tackle the tasks of the day. He had no intention of letting his other responsibilities slip. Instead, the sense of purpose regarding Charlotte's situation fueled him, making him all the more efficient. By 11, a call came through from the Pinewood Complex manager. Alexander snatched up the phone, anticipating good news. "Mr. Pierce," came the manager's voice, "we've processed your deposit and first-month payment." The unit is ready any time. We can even let the tenant move in by this weekend if she likes." "Excellent," Alexander replied, a smile creeping into his tone. "I'll let her know. Thank you for the quick turnaround." He checked the time again, thinking Charlotte might be on a cleaning route. He shot a message to Karina. "Please see if Charlotte is available for a quick meeting before lunch." Moments later, Karina replied, "She's cleaning near the main conference halls. I'll let her supervisor know you need her." Within 10 minutes, there was a soft knock at Alexander's door. "Come in!" he called, heart quickening with anticipation. Charlotte entered, wearing her blue uniform and carrying the faint smell of disinfectant from mopping. She closed the door gently behind her. Her face was cautious, as always, but this time there was a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Pierce?" He waved for her to approach. "Please, have a seat." He gestured at a chair near his desk. She did so, looking around the room with a slight nervousness, as though she still couldn't believe she had regular conversations with the CEO in his private office. "I just got off the phone with the apartment manager," Alexander began. "They have everything ready. You can move in as soon as this weekend, if that's not too soon for you. I know it might be short notice." She stared, her mouth parting in a soft gasp. "This weekend? Already?" He offered an apologetic smile. "I know it's fast, but if you want to see the place in person first, we can head over after your shift, or whenever you're free. I just didn't want to hold off if you're eager to get out of your current apartment." Charlotte glanced down at her hands, which she'd folded tightly in her lap. "It's amazing. I mean, of course I want to move soon, it's just—" She looked up, tears gathering but not yet falling. "It's hard to process how quickly my life is changing. Last week I was crying in that bathroom, convinced I was about to lose my job. Now, I'm signing a lease for a safe apartment." "About the lease," he said gently, "don't worry too much. I'm co-signing for now, and we can revisit the arrangement later. The manager's flexible. You'll have the same rights as any tenant." She nodded, chewing her lip. "And I can still afford it once the babies come?" Alexander paused. "You won't have to cover full rent on your own until you're ready. Perhaps not for several months. That's part of the deal I made. I don't want you to stress about finances, especially when you'll need to focus on your health." His voice softened. "Charlotte, if you're worried about feeling indebted to me, please don't. I'm not doing this to trap you. It's purely to help." Those words seemed to ease the tension in her posture. She breathed out slowly. "I trust you," she said, surprising herself with how naturally the words came. "You've only shown me kindness so far." A gentle silence followed. He could see the relief in her eyes, tempered by the weight of everything happening so fast. Finally, he stood, walking around the desk to hand her 2 documents. "These are from HR. As of this morning, you're a direct employee. Here's a summary of your new benefits, including an expanded maternity policy. I've signed everything. You just need to sign too, acknowledging your acceptance." She stared at the papers, eyes shining. "Really? It's official?" He placed a pen by her side. "Yes, effective immediately. This way, if there's any medical situation with the twins, you don't have to worry about coverage. You'll get the best care possible." Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen, scanning the text. He wondered if she was overwhelmed by the legal jargon. She seemed to catch the main points, though, blinking hard as she realized how comprehensive it was. Taking a shaky breath, she signed both pages. Then she set the pen down as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. "This feels like such a gift," she said, voice quivering. "A lifesaver. I'll never be able to say thank you enough." Alexander gave a modest shrug, leaning against the edge of his desk. "No need. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. That's all I want." Charlotte stood, smoothing the front of her uniform, glancing toward the door. He sensed she was still uneasy about lingering too long in the CEO's office during work hours. "I'll do my best," she promised softly. "And about going to see the apartment, maybe tomorrow after my shift?" "That works," he agreed. "Let's plan on it. I'll have a car ready. We'll meet in the lobby around 5 if that's convenient." She nodded, offering a thankful smile. Then, her voice barely above a whisper, she added, "You've changed my life in just a few days, Mr. Pierce. It's a miracle to me." He felt a swell of emotion at her candor. "Call me Alexander," he reminded her gently. "And it's not a miracle. It's just the right thing. I'm glad you're letting me help." Without waiting for a reply, he extended a quick, polite handshake, one that lingered just a second longer than normal. Then he released her hand, and she slipped out of the office, her steps noticeably lighter than before. Alexander exhaled, turning to his window once again. The sunlight was bright, and for a moment he basked in the warmth that seemed to mirror the satisfaction in his chest. His phone buzzed on the desk. A glance revealed it was a message from the CFO. "Board Finance Subcommittee wants to talk RE employee accommodations. Urgent." The corner of Alexander's mouth twitched. He'd expected this pushback eventually. Some board members likely caught wind of a new expense line. They'd want answers, want to make sure the company's profit margins weren't sacrificed. He pocketed the phone and settled into his chair, thinking carefully. He'd defend his decision without hesitation. This was a line in the sand. If the board demanded he step back from supporting Charlotte, he'd push back harder. The subcommittee meeting was scheduled for 3 that afternoon. By the time Alexander walked into the conference room, a sleek space of glass walls and polished wood, the board members were already in their seats. 3 men and 2 women, each with various degrees of caution or curiosity etched on their faces. The CFO, James Keller, stood to greet Alexander. "Thanks for coming so promptly," he said, forcing a polite smile. "We'd like to understand a certain expense item that's come up in your direct approval queue." Alexander set his phone on the table, then took a seat at the head, facing them calmly. "I assumed as much. Let's get right to it. You're referring to the specialized maternity coverage and housing stipend for one of our employees, correct?" One of the board members, Ms. Remington, leaned forward. "Yes, Mr. Pierce. Our question is simple. Why the extraordinary measures? We have standard benefits in place. Why carve out an exception that appears to be a notable cost center for just one staff member?" Alexander met her gaze evenly. "Because this is a unique situation. The employee is a recent widow, pregnant with twins, and requires immediate stability. Our usual benefits, especially for contract or lower-tier staff, weren't enough to protect her in this circumstance. As CEO, I have the discretion to ensure any employee's well-being if it aligns with the company's values, and I believe it does." Another board member, a man in his 60s named Brantford, drummed his fingers on the table. "We're not heartless, Pierce, but we do have a fiduciary responsibility. If we give special treatment to one individual, doesn't that set a precedent? Others might demand the same." Alexander inhaled, controlling the flicker of annoyance. "We aren't discussing an unending policy for all. This is a case-by-case approach allowed within my executive power. Further, the cost is negligible relative to our overall budget. I've reviewed the numbers carefully. The entire expense is less than a fraction of a % of our monthly overhead." Keller, the CFO, cleared his throat gently. "Even so, it does stand out as unusual. We just want clarity on the rationale." Alexander's voice turned firm. "The rationale is that it's morally the right thing to do. It's also good for employee morale. Word travels fast in a company this large. When people see that we support them beyond mere contractual obligations, loyalty and productivity increase. There's an intangible ROI on compassion." A hush settled over the table. Remington studied him with a level gaze, then softened. "You seem quite passionate about this, Alexander. I trust you're aware that personal involvement in subordinate affairs can have complications. From a legal standpoint." He gave a measured nod. "I'm aware. Everything is documented, transparent, and in compliance with the law. I'm using discretionary funds allocated for employee welfare. If any legal questions arise, I'll address them. But I won't budge on this decision." For a tense moment, no one spoke. Then Keller sighed and closed a file in front of him. "I suppose that addresses our main concerns. There's no line item that suggests you're misusing company funds, and we can't argue with the minimal financial impact. As CFO, I just needed to confirm there was no hidden liability. If you're covering that angle, then from a financial perspective, we're satisfied, though cautious." Brantford pursed his lips, but he said nothing more. The others, picking up the mood, nodded in cautious acceptance. The subcommittee recognized that challenging Alexander further was unlikely to succeed, and might appear heartless. Ms. Remington tapped a pen thoughtfully on her binder. "All right then, I believe we've resolved this. Thank you, Mr. Pierce." He stood, offering a polite nod. "Thank you all for hearing me out." Without further pleasantries, he exited the conference room, chest tight with a surge of adrenaline. The conversation had gone about as expected, some pushback, but ultimately the board had yielded to his judgment. He glanced at the time on his phone, relieved to see he still had breathing room before the end of the day. Memories of Charlotte's trembling hands while signing her paperwork played in his mind. He felt a wave of calm. The board wouldn't stand in his way. She would remain fully protected under the company's umbrella. When his final meeting ended around 5, he hurried to the lobby to meet Charlotte as planned. She wasn't there yet, so he waited by the large windows, watching employees stream past on their way out. At 5:13, she appeared, wearing her own casual clothes now, simple jeans and a sweater. She'd swapped out the janitorial uniform and her hair was combed neatly back. Upon seeing him, she offered a warm, shy smile. "Sorry," she said, cheeks faintly pink. "I had to finish up a spill near the cafeteria and change quickly." "Don't worry." Alexander gestured toward the entrance. "Shall we?" They stepped out into the crisp evening air. The sun hovered low, painting the streets with a muted golden hue. His sedan was waiting, and he opened the rear door for Charlotte. She slid in, eyes flicking around with equal parts curiosity and nervousness. He joined her, instructing the driver to head to Pinewood Complex. The ride took barely 10 minutes, weaving through steady city traffic. Charlotte peered out the window, hands clasped over her purse. As they neared Pinewood, she caught sight of the tidy gated entrance. A security guard waved them in, and the manager, whom Alexander had met earlier, was already standing by the building's glass doors. Stepping out of the car, Charlotte inhaled sharply, taking in the manicured shrubs and the modest but well-kept lobby. The manager introduced himself, leading them up to the second floor. They paused at Unit 204, the manager unlocking it with a flourish. A faint smell of fresh paint greeted them. "Oh," Charlotte breathed, stepping inside. The living room was small yet bright, large windows letting in the dying light of day. A compact kitchen stretched to the left, its counters gleaming with recent polish. She moved slowly as though afraid to break the spell. "It's so nice, so clean." Alexander followed her, letting her take the lead. She explored the bedrooms, one slightly larger than the other. Her gaze lingered in the second bedroom, likely imagining how 2 cribs might fit. Gently, she pressed a hand against the wall, almost testing its solidity. Turning back to Alexander, her eyes shimmered with moisture. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I can't believe this is for me." He tucked his hands into his pockets, smiling softly. "I'm glad you like it. You can decorate however you want, put up baby things. The manager can help with any small additions like a safety gate for the front door or whatever else you need." They returned to the living room. The manager explained the final steps. "We just need your signature, Ms. Charlotte, and Mr. Pierce's as co-signer. Utilities can be switched on by tomorrow. The furniture is minimal, but the basics are here. A couch, a small dining table. You can bring anything else at your convenience." Charlotte nodded, her voice catching. "I have, well, not much, but I'll figure it out." She paused, turning to Alexander. "Can I move in this weekend, you said?" He nodded. "Absolutely, if you're up to it. I'll arrange a small moving service, too. No cost to you. Just let me know what day." She took a moment to steady herself, then gave the manager a decisive nod. "Yes, I'd like to move in this weekend." Smiling, the manager produced the lease agreement. Charlotte and Alexander sat briefly on the living room's lone couch, signing the documents where indicated. The pen felt momentous in Charlotte's hand, as if each stroke signaled the start of a new life. Alexander glanced at her face, seeing the mix of gratitude and disbelief. When the final paper was signed, the manager departed to handle copies, leaving them briefly alone in the quiet unit. Charlotte stood, taking a slow turn around the living room, letting her fingertips skim the windowsill. "I can't thank you enough," she said softly, her back turned. "But I'll keep trying to anyway." Alexander walked to her side, gazing at the dusky skyline outside. The hush of the city's evening bustle drifted up from below, muted by the thick glass. "No need," he repeated gently. "Seeing you safe here is more than enough thanks." She looked down, blinking away tears. "I'm just so relieved." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a comforting gesture that felt increasingly natural. "You deserve it," he said. "Your babies deserve it. There's no shame in accepting help when you need it." Turning to face him, she managed a small, wobbly smile. "You've made it easier to believe that," she admitted. They stood for a moment, the quiet warmth between them filling the space. There was no rush, no demands, just a shared sense of accomplishment and perhaps the first real glimmer of peace for Charlotte since her husband's death. Footsteps in the corridor announced the manager's return. He handed Charlotte a set of keys, then parted with a polite handshake and promised to see her on move-in day. After he left, they locked up, heading back to the elevator. Charlotte held the keys in her hand as if they were fragile, precious gems. Once outside, the driver opened the sedan's back door again. Charlotte paused, glancing back at the building's facade. Lights had come on in some windows, creating a pattern of domestic coziness in the dimming sky. With a trembling exhale, she turned and slipped into the car, Alexander following her. As they pulled away, the tension in her posture lifted. She leaned back against the seat, a mixture of weariness and contentment on her face. The entire day had been a whirlwind, but now it seemed she could finally catch her breath. "Would you like a ride home?" Alexander offered. "It's not far from here, I believe." She nodded gratefully. "Yes, please." They drove in companionable silence. When they arrived at her current apartment, a stark contrast to Pinewood's clean facade, Alexander felt a pang of relief that she'd soon be leaving. The flickering street lamp and the chipped stairway paint underscored everything about this place that he'd wanted to rescue her from. He waited as she unbuckled her seatbelt. She turned to him, that gentle smile resurfacing. "Thank you," she said, voice low but sure. "For everything, Mr. Pierce. Alexander." He returned the smile, noticing how the color in her cheeks seemed a bit brighter than before. "Get some rest," he said softly. "We'll coordinate details tomorrow. Don't hesitate to call if you need anything." She slid out, hugging her purse to her chest. With a final wave, she disappeared into the building's dimly lit corridor. Alexander watched until she was safely inside, then directed his driver to head back to his own condo. On the ride, he found himself staring out at the city lights again, reflecting on how little time it had taken to shift Charlotte's world from despair to hope. The day felt complete. Each step he'd taken, meeting the board, finalizing her contract, seeing her new apartment, had been a puzzle piece locking into place. Yet, as satisfying as it was, He knew their story together wasn't finished. Charlotte still faced the challenges of pregnancy, the upcoming medical appointments, and the emotional burden of grieving her husband. If anything, the real journey had just begun. But for now, as the car merged onto a wide boulevard, Alexander allowed himself a rare moment of serenity. He thought about how, a mere week ago, he was simply a busy CEO stepping into the wrong restroom, harried, isolated in his own bubble. Everything had changed because of a chance encounter, a single moment of empathy that refused to let go of him. He closed his eyes, the faint hum of the sedan's engine lulling him. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, more board scrutiny, more corporate demands. Yet a part of him welcomed it all, eager to see Charlotte settle into her new life, eager to stand by her if things got rocky. And who knew? Perhaps in helping her he was learning to open doors within himself that he hadn't even known were locked. He arrived at his condo feeling lighter than he had in years. Under the glow of his building's lobby, he made a mental note to check on Charlotte's first day in her new place. Maybe he'd send a small housewarming gift or arrange to have groceries delivered so she wouldn't be overwhelmed by errands. The idea made him smile. Yes, from a single misstep in a hallway, a whole new path had formed, one that felt more genuinely human than anything his perfect daily schedule had ever offered. And he found himself walking it willingly, drawn by a sense of purpose he could no longer deny. By the time the weekend arrived, move-in day, Charlotte's anxiety had reached a fever pitch. Though the path had been cleared, the paperwork signed, and the place readied, she couldn't shake the lurking fear that some new disaster would sweep it all away. She lay awake for most of Friday night, listening to the hum of nearby traffic outside her window. In her small bedroom, half-packed boxes stood like silent witnesses to a life on the verge of monumental change. Still, by dawn, resolve replaced her fear. She got up, carefully packed the last of her belongings, mostly clothes, a few picture frames, and the cherished ultrasound images she kept tucked in a protective sleeve. Half her items were already in boxes stacked by the door. A couple of neighbors, older women who had always been kind, came by to offer help. One brought an old baby crib she no longer needed, promising to drop it off at Charlotte's new place once she had a free afternoon. Grateful, Charlotte accepted, even though she was uncertain how she would assemble or use it for two babies. Every small kindness felt like a lifeline. Around 9, a knock at the door startled her. Expecting to see a neighbor, or maybe the friend of a friend who'd promised a borrowed car, she swung it open. Instead, Alexander stood there, his tall frame nearly filling the cramped doorway. He was dressed down from his usual suits, khakis, a casual sweater, sleeves rolled to the forearm. Behind him, a young man in a black t-shirt, likely a professional mover, hovered nearby, glancing at a clipboard. "Good morning," Alexander said, offering a disarming smile. "I hope we're not too early?" She blinked in surprise, her cheeks flushing. "I wasn't expecting you to come yourself." He shrugged lightly. "It's your big day. Thought I'd be more useful on site. Besides, I didn't want to leave you doing all this alone." He glanced over her shoulder at the half-filled boxes. "May we come in?" Charlotte stepped aside, nodding. "Yes, of course." The mover introduced himself as Gabe, then proceeded to survey the boxes, scribbling notes about the volume of items to transport. As Charlotte moved to fetch her last-minute things, Alexander quietly took in the sparse apartment, a single worn couch, a small TV propped on a crate, and peeling paint around the windows. A pang of relief hit him that this would soon be part of her past. He couldn't help but wonder how long she'd endured these surroundings, day after day, grieving and worrying about the twins. "Anything I can help with?" he asked gently, spotting her struggling to close a bulging box of odds and ends, detergent bottles, random kitchenware. She smiled apologetically. "I'm not used to, well, you helping like this. But if you don't mind, maybe just hold the box flap shut so I can tape it?" He chuckled. "Happy to." Stooping down, he pressed the cardboard flaps together while she maneuvered the tape. Their hands brushed briefly. She flushed, but kept her focus on sealing the tape. Before long, Gabe and another mover, who'd arrived shortly after, loaded the boxes onto a hand truck, taking them down to a small moving van Alexander had arranged. He'd insisted on paying for the movers, overruling Charlotte's protests. Now, as they bustled in and out, Charlotte found herself standing in an echoing living room that no longer felt like home. The dusty air and emptiness only amplified the sense of finality. "You okay?" Alexander asked, noticing the way her gaze lingered on the walls. She pressed a hand to her belly, forcing a shaky smile. "Yes, it's just, this was the last place my husband and I shared. We didn't love it, but it was ours. It feels strange to leave it behind." He nodded, empathy filling his expression. Moving on is always complicated, but think of it as a step toward better things. You aren't losing those memories. You're just carrying them somewhere safer. Her lips curved in a grateful smile. "Thank you. That helps." With the final boxes carried out, Charlotte did a last sweep of each room. Quiet goodbyes, in a way. Then she flicked off the overhead lights, locked the front door, and slipped the key into the landlord's mailbox, her notice having been given. Her heart fluttered as she turned away, stepping into the morning sunlight that now felt surprisingly bright. Alexander gestured toward his car. "Shall we follow the movers to Pinewood, or do you want to ride in the van with them?" She glanced at the rumbling truck, its open back displaying her few belongings strapped securely. Then she turned to the comfortable sedan that Alexander drove today. No chauffeur this time, just him and the car. "I'll come with you," she decided softly. "If that's okay." He gave a small nod. "Sure, let's go." The drive was brief, just like before, but to Charlotte it felt like a journey across worlds. She clutched a small bag in her lap containing her most precious items, while Alexander steered through city streets she rarely ventured into. Soon, the Pinewood complex sign came into view and the security gate lifted at Alexander's wave. Outside Unit 204, the movers wasted no time carrying boxes inside. Alexander unlocked the door for Charlotte and she stepped into her new living room for the first time as a tenant, not just a visitor. Morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the clean walls and fresh carpet. She noticed that someone, likely the building manager, had left a small potted plant on the kitchen counter, perhaps a housewarming gesture. "I'll check in with the manager," Alexander said, setting his keys down. "Make sure everything's in order. You can tell the movers where to place your boxes." She nodded, and he exited, leaving her momentarily alone in the vacant space. She ran her fingers along the smooth countertop, flicked on a light switch in the hallway, and peered into the bedrooms again. It felt more real this time, knowing this was hers. Gabe brought in the last load, panting slightly. "Where do you want this box?" he asked, indicating a scuffed-up carton labeled Misk. "In the larger bedroom," she directed. "Thanks." One by one, the rooms started to fill with her meager possessions. The movers were quick, depositing boxes neatly, offering polite nods whenever Charlotte tried to help. She soon found she could do little more than direct traffic. "Kitchen, please. That one in the living room. Bedroom closet for that bag." Even so, she felt a little dizzy from excitement and exhaustion. Less than an hour later, the movers had finished. After signing some papers on the hood of the truck, Alexander discreetly covered the costs again. Charlotte stood in the middle of her new living room, surrounded by boxes waiting to be unpacked. Despite the clutter, the space felt airy and welcoming, a world away from her old run-down place. Alexander returned from the manager's office, a set of papers in hand. "All sorted, utilities under your name now, but already activated. Electricity, water, the basics. They'll finalize your billing info in a few weeks. For now, you should have hot water and lights." She beamed at him, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you," she said, for what felt like the 1,000th time. Still, it never seemed sufficient to convey the depth of her appreciation. He gave a modest shrug. I'm just happy it's coming together smoothly." Glancing around, Charlotte spotted a couple of folding chairs stacked in the corner. "I should probably offer you something to drink," she said. "But I don't even have groceries yet." Alexander waved it off. "No worries. We'll handle that next. Let's say we do a quick run to get some essentials. Milk, bread, whatever you need. Maybe some items for the babies if you like." She looked flustered, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't have much money on me right now. I'm going to get my first check under the new contract, but not until—" "You'll let me cover it," he interjected gently. "We've come this far, Charlotte. You need to eat, and you need the basics. Let's not complicate it. You can repay me in 1,000 different ways down the line, if you insist." She opened her mouth to protest, but a grateful smile replaced her words. "All right," she conceded. "Thank you." Before they left, Alexander noticed her gaze drift to the stack of boxes labeled baby stuff. She hadn't bought much yet, just a handful of second-hand items and small clothes that made her pregnancy feel more tangible. He read the flicker of worry in her eyes. "We can also stop by a store for anything you need for the twins," he offered quietly. "It's okay." She swallowed, nodding. "Even if I just look for now. My doctor says I have time, but I can't help feeling unprepared." He gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Small steps. Let's focus on getting you settled. We'll tackle the rest as it comes." 15 minutes later, they pulled into a nearby supermarket. The hustle of midday shoppers surrounded them, families, couples, lone individuals with carts piled high. Charlotte held onto a shopping basket, her eyes scanning each aisle with the tentative air of someone who rarely shopped in nicer stores. Alexander walked beside her, hands in his pockets, offering suggestions now and then. "Don't forget some fresh fruit," he'd say, or "might as well grab basic cleaning supplies." Occasionally, she'd glance at him with something like amusement. "You're awfully good at this for a busy CEO," she teased softly. He chuckled. "Let's just say I've spent a lot of time in negotiations. Grocery shopping is just another list of priorities to check off." She found herself smiling more than she had in weeks, even as she fretted over prices. Each time she picked up a can of soup or a bag of bread, she felt a pang of guilt letting him pay. But he never flinched when the bill totaled at the register. He simply swiped his card as though this were the most natural thing in the world. "You'll see," he murmured at her anxious expression. "All of this is just to get you started." They transferred the bags to his car. The ride back was quieter. Charlotte looked pensive, staring out the window as they neared Pinewood. When they pulled into the parking spot, she sighed, glancing at Alexander. "I think this is the first time in months I've felt like I might actually be okay." He met her gaze, warmth in his eyes. "You will be, and if anything comes up, you have my number." They hauled the groceries up to the apartment, unloading them on the kitchen counter. Charlotte busied herself arranging items in cupboards. The kitchen smelled faintly of cleaning solution and the coffee grounds they'd bought, a scent that comforted her. Alexander helped, passing boxes and cans her way, occasionally asking where she wanted them. Soon, everything found a place. When the last bag was emptied, Charlotte leaned against the counter, exhaling in relief. "This is surreal," she admitted. "Just yesterday I was in a cramped place with hardly anything." He tossed the empty plastic bag aside. "You've got a fresh start now," he said quietly. "Focus on that." A moment passed in companionable silence. Then Charlotte straightened. "I should offer you something. We have juice if you want." She gave a soft laugh. "I can't promise it'll be fancy." He paused, grinning. "Sure, juice sounds great." She poured 2 glasses of orange juice, handing him one. They clinked them in a playful, impromptu toast. "To your new home," Alexander said, lifting his glass. Charlotte's eyes brimmed with gratitude. "To new beginnings," she whispered, taking a sip. They stood there for a moment, letting the words sink in. She noticed him glance around, checking for anything else that might need doing. "I can stay and help unpack," he offered, "but I don't want to invade your space if you need rest." Her cheeks flushed. "I don't want to take more of your time. You've done so much. I can handle these boxes slowly. I'll probably sort things out room by room." He nodded. "All right, just promise you won't overexert yourself, okay? If you need help, call me. Or Karina can schedule someone to assist. We have volunteers sometimes for these situations." A small laugh escaped her. "Volunteers for employees who move? Is that actually a thing?" He shrugged, smiling. "We have a pretty robust community outreach program. Some staff are always willing to lend a hand. It's not just business here, you know." "I'll keep that in mind," she said, still charmed by the idea. "Thank you." Finally, Alexander checked his watch. He hesitated, as if reluctant to leave. But reality tugged at him. Work emails, weekend reports, possibly a dinner with a board member. "I should go," he said, subdued. "But I'll check on you tomorrow, see how you're settling in." She walked him to the door, hands clasped at her waist. "I'll be fine," she said softly. "You've already given me so much." He shifted, looking down at her. Their eyes locked for a moment, something unspoken passing between them, an understanding that this bond they'd formed was deeper than just CEO and employee. Then he nodded, stepping into the hallway. Before the door closed, he glanced back, offering a gentle smile. "I'll see you soon, Charlotte, and welcome home." When he was gone, Charlotte pressed her hand to the door, heart thrumming. Home. That single word carried the promise of safety, comfort, and a future for the twins she carried under her heart. After a moment, she turned, surveying the half-empty boxes with an expression that was almost giddy. For the first time in months, she no longer felt alone. It was a startling, humbling realization. Soon she'd have to face her next doctor's appointment, face the prospect of raising twins without her late husband. But now she had a place of her own, a place where she felt safe enough to breathe, to dream even. And though she worried about leaning too heavily on Alexander, she couldn't deny the warmth that filled her chest whenever she remembered his calm voice or the kindness in his eyes. With a light step, she crossed into the living room. She was alone in a new space with 1,000 things to sort and organize, yet she felt oddly peaceful. This was the beginning of her next chapter, one that no longer revolved solely around loss and fear. As she knelt to open a box marked Memories, a soft tear slid down her cheek. It was a tear of release, mingled with relief and the smallest flicker of hope. She whispered a quiet thank you to the universe, maybe even to her husband's spirit if he was watching, and started to unpack, heart lighter than it had been in a very long time. The weekend drifted by in a blur of unpacking, gentle organization, and short moments of rest whenever Charlotte's body reminded her she was pregnant with twins. Each time she felt a twinge in her lower back or a wave of fatigue, she paused, recalling Alexander's words, "Don't overexert yourself." On Sunday morning, she awoke early. The unfamiliar hush of her new apartment was both comforting and strange. For so long she'd heard her old neighbors banging doors, traffic echoes, or the hum of a faulty fridge in the kitchen. Now, soft light filtered through clean windows, and all she heard was the occasional murmur of neighbors in the hallway, the sort of peaceful, everyday sound she'd never quite experienced before. She took a few minutes to lie still, palm pressed over the subtle curve of her abdomen, greeting the life stirring within. It felt surreal to think that just a week ago she'd been so certain that her future hinged on whether she'd even have a job, let alone a safe home. With a decisive breath, she got up, pulling on comfortable clothes. She'd promised herself to tackle the smaller bedroom today, sorting the baby items into neat piles. Even if it was early in her pregnancy, she wanted to feel prepared. She made her way to the kitchen for a quick bowl of cereal, smiling at the memory of shopping with Alexander. He'd insisted on paying for things like fresh fruit, good cereal, and vitamins her doctor recommended. She'd never experienced anyone caring for her needs in such a direct, unwavering way. Just as she finished breakfast, a gentle knock sounded on her door. Startled, she set the bowl aside, heart fluttering. She peeked through the peephole, half expecting to see Alexander. Instead, the building manager, Mr. Mills, stood outside, holding a small folder under one arm. "Morning," he greeted when she opened the door. "Sorry to bother you so early. I wanted to drop off some paperwork. Details about trash schedules, parking regulations, that sort of thing." He handed her the folder with a polite smile. "Also, we like to check in with new tenants during their first weekend to see if you need anything." "All good so far?" She nodded, returning his smile. "Yes, everything's great. Thank you so much. The place is really lovely." He glanced at a few unopened boxes still in the living area. "I see you're still settling in. If you run into any maintenance issues, don't hesitate to call. And—" He paused, voice lowering conspiratorially. "Just between us, the complex is honored to have Mr. Pierce supporting you. He's well respected around here. Helped our owners resolve a security contract last year, I believe." Charlotte felt a brief flush of warmth. "He's been incredibly kind," she admitted. The manager nodded knowingly, then checked his watch. "All right, I won't keep you. Have a good day, Miss Charlotte." With a wave, he headed back to the elevator. She closed the door, pressing the folder of paperwork to her chest. Her mind buzzed with the realization of how broad Alexander's reach was. Yet he'd chosen to invest some of that influence in her well-being. In a city of millions, it felt nothing short of miraculous. Determined to be productive, she turned her attention to the smaller bedroom. Though she had few baby supplies yet, she wanted to envision how to make the space a nursery. She dragged a light box of baby clothes to the center of the room, carefully laying out each piece. A few onesies, a pair of tiny socks, an old blanket a friend had given her for the twins. A pang of grief washed over her as she thought of her late husband, who'd once joked about painting a mural of cartoon animals when they eventually had kids. "You'd be happy to see this," she whispered to no one in particular, smoothing her hand over the blanket. "So I'll try to be happy enough for both of us." Her phone buzzed, distracting her from darker thoughts. She saw a text notification from Alexander. "Good morning. How's the new place treating you? Let me know if you need anything. Also, I have some news about our HR changes, all official now." A small smile tugged at her lips. Quickly, she typed a reply. "It's wonderful. Just unpacking the baby room now. Thank you for checking in. I'm doing all right." Within moments, her phone buzzed again. "Glad to hear. I'll be near Pinewood around noon. Could I drop by for a minute? Have a small gift to deliver?" Her heart skipped. A gift? She felt a surge of both gratitude and embarrassment. Already, he'd done so much. But she typed back, "You're too kind." "Sure, come by whenever you're free." By midday, Charlotte had managed to arrange a simple layout in the nursery, placing the small crib frame in one corner, boxes of baby clothes in another. She sat on the floor, sipping water, thinking she might take a short nap. The doorbell rang, jolting her alert. A glance at the clock showed it was just after noon. She stood, smoothing her hair, and opened the door to find Alexander holding a medium-sized cardboard box. He wore a casual button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, and the faintest smile. "Hi," she greeted, stepping aside. "Come in." He did, glancing around the apartment with an approving nod. "It looks more like a home now," he remarked, noticing the half-empty boxes put away neatly. Charlotte gestured at the box in his arms. "What's that?" He set it on the kitchen counter. "It's a care package from me and a few colleagues who found out about your situation. Some baby essentials, diapers, wipes, little things that can help you start a basic stockpile." His cheeks colored slightly, as if he were shy about admitting his involvement. "I hope that's okay." She stared, eyes widening. You didn't have to—" "Shh," he teased lightly, raising a hand. "I know, but I wanted to." He opened the box flaps, revealing neatly stacked packs of newborn diapers, sealed baby bottles, a few gentle baby soaps, and a soft teddy bear perched on top. I also included a gift card to a maternity store, just in case you need comfortable clothes soon. Tears pricked Charlotte's eyes. She reached for the teddy bear, pressing it against her. I don't know how to thank you. Alexander's gaze was warm, unwavering. You don't need to. Let's call it an investment in your peace of mind. She hugged the bear, overwhelmed. For a moment she worried he might see her tears, but she couldn't stop them entirely. I still feel like I'm living someone else's life, she managed, voice trembling. He moved closer, concern flickering on his face. Hey, take it slow. Breathe, he said softly. I know it's a lot at once, but you deserve it. You've been through so much. She nodded, swallowing back the sob that threatened. I'm okay, she whispered, forcing a shaky smile. Thank you for everything. Alexander gave a small nod, as though acknowledging her gratitude but not wanting to dwell on it. Can I see the nursery? He asked quietly, his tone gentle as though he recognized how emotional the subject might be. She led him to the second bedroom, where he surveyed the makeshift crib and the boxes of clothes. A flicker of sadness crossed his features, likely noting how little she had so far. But he masked it quickly. This will be sweet when it's all set up, he said encouragingly. The room's the perfect size. Charlotte offered a more stable smile now. It is, and I've got time to get everything ready. The doctor says I'm still early enough that I shouldn't stress, but you know how it is. I want to feel prepared. He nodded. Absolutely. Step by step. They lingered in the nursery for a moment, the sunlight slanting in through the curtains. A soft hush fell, both of them aware of the significance of this small space, soon to house two new lives. Then Alexander cleared his throat, stepping back. Actually, about doctors, he said, changing topics gently. Have you scheduled your next appointment? I recall you mentioning additional scans for the twins. She nodded, crossing her arms as if to ward off a slight chill. Next Friday, actually. It's a more detailed ultrasound. I'll likely need a half-day off work to get it done. Alexander's expression brightened. No problem. We'll arrange it so it doesn't affect your pay. Also, if you need a ride or anything. That's kind, but I can take a bus, she murmured, hesitating. She could see he was about to protest, so she added quickly, but maybe I'll let you know if I get too tired. He relented, the corner of his mouth quirking up. Deal. They moved back to the living room, and she remembered the care package. She tugged open the box again, fishing out a small bag of pacifiers. Do you have children, Alexander? She asked, curiosity getting the better of her. The question felt strangely intimate, but she realized she knew so little of his personal life. He shook his head, expression turning contemplative. No. Always told myself I was too busy running the company that I'd think about a family later. He paused, turning a pack of diapers over in his hands. Now I'm not sure what the future holds, but I've never had children. She sensed a hint of wistfulness in his voice, quickly replaced by a guarded calm. Well, you seem to know a lot about what babies need, she teased gently, holding up the baby soap. He gave a soft laugh. I read a few articles, asked a couple of colleagues who are parents. I wanted to be sure we got the basics right. Charlotte's chest tightened with gratitude. It struck her again how methodical he was, using his organizational skills not just to run a billion-dollar business, but to support her in ways that felt deeply personal. For a moment, she didn't know how to handle the tenderness that welled up. She cleared her throat, wanting to express something more than a simple thank you, but words failed her. Instead, she lightly touched his arm, letting her hand linger a second. Really, you're the reason I'm not drowning in worry, she said softly. Their eyes met, and she saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze, as though he, too, felt a momentary connection that went beyond the usual boundaries of CEO and employee. 1,000 unspoken things passed between them in that quiet space, but neither voiced them. Eventually, Alexander checked his phone, a hesitant shift in his posture. "I should let you rest," he said, stepping away. "I have some calls to handle this afternoon, but if anything comes up, call me." She nodded, walking him to the door. Before he left, he paused, glancing back. "Take care, Charlotte. Don't forget, if you need absolutely anything, I'm here." When the door clicked shut behind him, Charlotte stood in the silence of her apartment, heart pounding as if she'd just run a marathon. She couldn't pinpoint why his departure left her feeling both calmer and more unsettled at the same time. Slowly, she returned to the kitchen, staring at the care package. A hush enveloped her, and she gently pulled out the teddy bear, running a finger over its fuzzy ear. She tried to imagine the future, her twins sleeping in their cribs, this teddy resting nearby, her life stable and secure. It was the first time in a while she could see a future that wasn't clouded by fear, yet a part of her also recognized something else stirring, a subtle warmth that had blossomed whenever she was around Alexander these last few days. She pushed the thought aside, reminding herself of all he'd done, out of kindness, goodwill, and maybe a sense of responsibility. She wouldn't read too much into it. They were two people from vastly different worlds, and he was simply demonstrating the best of human compassion. But as she carefully placed the teddy on a small shelf in the nursery, she couldn't entirely deny the flutter in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, they had found a rare, unexpected bond, one that went deeper than any corporate relationship. For now, she told herself, it was enough to be safe, to be cared for, and to have hope growing right alongside the two tiny lives within her. Monday morning finds Charlotte rising early, stirred by the subtle ache in her lower back and the persistent thoughts of her upcoming ultrasound on Friday. Outside, pale light cuts through her window blinds, illuminating the fresh paint on the walls of her bedroom. She places a hand on her belly, feeling the faint flutters that remind her she's carrying two tiny lives inside. The fear that once accompanied such moments, the dread of doing it all alone, has shifted into a cautious optimism. She can't help replaying the kindness she's received from Alexander. Even the memory of him delivering the baby supplies warms her heart. After a quick breakfast of toast and fruit, Charlotte readies herself for work. She's still a member of the janitorial team, albeit now with the company's direct hire status. Despite her new housing and benefits, she's determined to maintain her independence and sense of routine. She dresses in the loose blue uniform, tying her hair back into a simple ponytail. Arriving at Pierce & Co., she's greeted by the bustle of employees striding across polished floors, arms full of laptops and files. The building's grandeur still daunts her, but she no longer feels entirely invisible within its walls. Her supervisor greets her with a nod, instructing her to start the day on the lower floors. She moves through the corridors with measured steps, mindful not to strain herself. By mid-morning, she's wiping down a row of glass partitions near the legal department when her phone buzzes. She quickly checks it, a short message from Karina, Alexander's assistant. "Mr. Pierce wants to see you for a moment if you're free. Conference room 3A, 10:15. Charlotte's pulse quickens. She wonders if something is wrong. Has the board changed its mind about her arrangement? Has a policy snag threatened her new contract? A swirl of apprehension bubbles inside her as she tidies her cleaning supplies. She checks her watch, 10:05. Taking a quick breath, she heads upstairs. Conference room 3A is smaller and more private than the grand boardroom. She steps in hesitantly, noticing Alexander seated at a round table with a tall man in a trim suit. Another figure stands near the window, a woman in business attire cradling a tablet. They all look up at her entrance. Alexander offers an encouraging smile. "Charlotte, come in." She moves closer, feeling the tension in the room but also catching the gentle reassurance in his eyes. "Is everything okay?" He gestures toward an empty seat. Absolutely. I wanted to introduce you to two people from our company's Family Resources division, Daniel and Megan. We've been discussing some extended services we might offer you during your pregnancy. Charlotte's eyes flick between them, uncertain. Services? Megan steps forward, extending a polite hand. So nice to meet you, Charlotte. We handle specialized employee assistance programs, like counseling, parenting classes, resource referrals. Typically, we only talk to employees who request it, but Mr. Pierce felt you might benefit from knowing these resources exist. There's no pressure, of course. Alexander nods. I ask them to put together a small plan, just in case you ever need help, like rides to medical appointments or postpartum support. I realize you might not use everything, but I want you aware it's there. Relief flows through Charlotte, dispelling her earlier fears. She sinks into the seat, grateful that this is good news, not a corporate crackdown. Wow, I didn't know we had that. Daniel, the tall man, smiles gently. It's part of our holistic employee wellness approach. We can arrange flexible scheduling around your doctor visits. Also, if bed rest becomes necessary later, we have a home support program. People who can come help with errands if you'd like. Charlotte glances at Alexander, heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, all of you. I'm not used to so much assistance, but it's reassuring to know it's possible. Megan hands her a neatly bound folder. Here's a summary. You can read it whenever. No immediate decisions needed. They spend a brief few minutes outlining how she might schedule sessions with a counselor if she's feeling stressed or mourning her late husband. Charlotte feels a lump in her throat at the mention, but it's comforting to know help is there. Megan and Daniel wrap up quickly, explaining they're available by phone or email. They depart with polite goodbyes, leaving Charlotte alone with Alexander. A hush lingers, his gaze tender as he notes her reaction. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, he says softly. She closes the folder, pressing it to her lap. A bit overwhelming, but in a good way. I just never imagined a company could do all this. He nods. I want you to have every resource possible. You've got enough on your mind already. For a moment, neither speaks. Then Charlotte musters courage to address something that's been quietly gnawing at her. Alexander, I worry about imposing too much on your kindness. You've done so much. My new contract, the apartment, the baby supplies, and now this. I'm grateful, but also... She doesn't finish, unsure how to phrase the rest of her thought. That she's afraid of the emotional closeness forming between them. That she's worried she'll become dependent or that she might misread his intentions. He reaches across the table, placing a hand near hers but not quite touching. I understand. But please believe me when I say I'm happy to do it, every step of the way. Her shoulders relax. That quiet promise, offered with no sense of burden, soothes her doubts. She gives a small, grateful smile. Thank you. It's just a lot for my heart to handle sometimes. He opens his mouth perhaps to reply, but his phone buzzes. A quick glance at the screen, something urgent from the CFO. With a resigned sigh, he looks at her. Duty calls, but talk to me anytime, okay? She stands as well, hugging the folder to her chest. Of course, I'll head back now. As she steps into the corridor, an odd feeling of lightness accompanies her. It's not just about the resources he's provided, but the intangible warmth in his gaze, the sense that she's not a burden. She's an individual, cherished in her own right, though she can't quite define how or why. The rest of her shift passes quickly, punctuated by fleeting twinges in her abdomen that remind her she needs to pace herself. When her supervisor notices her wincing slightly while bending, he immediately suggests she take a lighter load. His sudden accommodation confirms that word has traveled about her new contract and the CEO's personal involvement. Though Charlotte sometimes frets about being singled out, she can't deny the relief of having less strain on her body. After work, She returns to her new apartment. The hallway feels calm, neighbors chatting quietly behind closed doors. Inside, she warms up a simple dinner, then sinks onto the couch with a contented sigh. Her phone shows no new messages from Alexander, and she feels a gentle pang of disappointment. Strange how quickly she's grown used to his check-ins. She sets aside the folder from Family Resources, planning to review it more thoroughly. A few points catch her eye: postpartum nurse visits, a volunteer network for baby clothes, even a group session for single parents. Each offering feels like a lifeline. Before bed, she scrolls through her phone, half tempted to text Alexander just to say thank you again. But she resists. Surely he has more pressing matters. Yet the faint flicker of longing remains as she turns off the lights. She's never known such genuine support from someone outside her family. Questions swirl. Is it purely altruistic? Is there a deeper connection forming? She cradles the teddy bear from the care package as she lies down. The next few days follow a steady rhythm. Charlotte juggles her reduced tasks at the company, takes short walks around her new neighborhood, and gradually unpacks the last of her boxes. Her world is no longer defined by constant struggle, but rather by measured hope. Occasionally, Alexander crosses her path at the office, sometimes with a simple wave, other times with a quick chat in a hallway. He appears busy, fielding calls and rushing between board discussions. She hears whispers among co-workers about expansions overseas, about stock performance. She senses the weight he carries, and a fresh wave of gratitude arises that he still finds time for her. Then, Thursday afternoon arrives. Charlotte's next ultrasound is just a day away. The anticipation gnaws at her. Will the twins be healthy? Is everything progressing as it should? She's more anxious than she cares to admit, haunted by the fear that tragedy might steal something else precious from her. At her lunch break, she musters the courage to text Alexander, "Hey, it's Charlotte. Tomorrow is my ultrasound. Just wanted to let you know I'll be leaving work around noon to make the appointment. Thank you again for making sure my hours are covered." His reply comes quickly. "No problem at all. Do you want me to drive you? I'm free after 11:30. She stares at the text, heart fluttering. Part of her wants to say yes. His presence would calm her. Another part warns her not to lean too heavily on him. She types, deletes, retypes. If you're sure it's not an inconvenience, I'd actually appreciate the support. His response is instant. "I'll be at your desk at noon. See you then." A mix of relief and nervous energy surges inside her. No one's ever accompanied her to a prenatal appointment since her husband's death. The thought that Alexander, with his imposing schedule, would offer his time so freely is both comforting and slightly terrifying. Friday morning dawns with a brightness that belies Charlotte's inner jitters. She does her best to focus on routine tasks, but her mind drifts to the ultrasound. Images of the twins fill her thoughts. She attempts deep breaths, recalling what her counselor, whom she'd briefly called from the Family Resources list, suggested for anxiety management. Finally, noon arrives. True to his word, Alexander appears in the corridor where she's finishing a wipe-down of a glass wall. He's wearing a neat button-down and slacks, exuding a quiet composure. There's a softness in his gaze when she turns to him. "Ready?" he asks. She nods, stuffing her cleaning rag into a small caddy. "Let me just drop this off and I'll be good to go." They leave the building together. Karina catches Charlotte's eye on the way out, offering a gentle, knowing smile. Soon they're in Alexander's car, driving toward the medical center. The ride is mostly quiet, the hum of traffic filling the space. Occasionally, Alexander glances her way as if checking her emotional temperature. She forces a small smile, letting him know she's all right, at least for the moment. Outside the clinic, he parks. Charlotte tries to quell the fluttering in her chest as they step through the glass doors into a waiting area painted in pastel tones. Other expectant mothers sit in rows of chairs, partners or family members by their sides. A pang grips Charlotte. Memories of how her husband once accompanied her, how they used to hold hands, discussing baby names. She checks in at the reception. The nurse directs them to a seat. Charlotte lowers herself carefully, conscious of her body's changes. Alexander sits beside her, uncharacteristically quiet, scanning the environment. "You okay?" he finally murmurs, leaning close enough that his aftershave drifts faintly around her. She nods, exhaling. "Yeah, just memories." His hand hovers near hers, uncertain if he should offer physical comfort in this public space. After a second, he settles for a reassuring smile. "I'm here," he says softly. Her eyes glisten. She swallows hard, leaning back. "Thank you." A few minutes later, a nurse calls her name. Heart pounding, Charlotte stands. Alexander rises too, but the nurse hesitates. "Is this the father?" she asks politely, eyeing him. Heat flushes Charlotte's cheeks. "He's my friend," she explains awkwardly. "If it's okay, I'd like him to come in for support." The nurse, accustomed to myriad family situations, merely nods. "Of course. Right this way." They follow her to a dimly lit ultrasound room. Charlotte settles on the examination table, her sweater pulled up just below her ribcage. The technician, a kind-faced woman with a gentle manner, greets them and preps the machine. Alexander stands by Charlotte's side, near her head, his presence a calming anchor. The technician spreads cool gel across Charlotte's abdomen, then presses the ultrasound wand lightly. A black and white image blossoms on the monitor, revealing shapes that flicker in rhythmic pulses. "There they are," the technician says softly, pointing. "2 heartbeats, both strong." Charlotte's eyes fill with tears at the sight. She cranes her neck to see more clearly. "They're okay?" she asks in a whisper. "Looking good," the tech confirms, developing right on schedule. Alexander can't tear his gaze from the screen. The small forms flicker and shift, so unmistakably alive. He glances at Charlotte's face. Tears slip down her cheeks, but there's a radiant joy in them. Moved by instinct, he places a gentle hand on her shoulder, giving it the faintest squeeze. In that hushed exam room, time seems to suspend. For a few poignant seconds, it's just them and the miracle on the screen. 2 tiny hearts beating in tandem. Charlotte murmurs a grateful prayer under her breath, recalling all she's lost but also all she's gained. The childlike flickers on the monitor represent her future. Complicated, yes, but also unexpectedly hopeful. When the technician finishes, Charlotte wipes away the gel. She can't hide her grin as she receives the printed ultrasound images, this time clearer than before. The lumps of worry that once gnawed at her loosen their hold, replaced by relief. And Alexander's presence is a buoy, a quiet testament that she doesn't have to face these moments alone. "Everything looks wonderful," the technician repeats, offering a warm smile before leaving them to gather their things. Alexander helps Charlotte sit up carefully, then hands her a tissue for the tears that still cling to her lashes. He can't quite form the right words to encapsulate what he's feeling, but he tries. "I'm so happy for you," he murmurs, voice low. She nods, voice trembling. "Thank you for being here." In that quiet room, the pair exchange a look that carries more weight than either fully understands. Outside, the world continues at its brisk pace, but for them, this small pocket of time is charged with relief, gratitude, and a gentle shift towards something neither dares to name yet. They step back into the hallway, the future feeling brighter than ever. For Charlotte, the living ache of loss still exists, but now it's accompanied by a sense of steady strength, buttressed by kindness she never expected. And for Alexander, who once thrived solely on corporate triumphs, there's a stirring realization that this, protecting and sharing in someone's deeply personal journey, might be the most meaningful success he's ever known. Outside the clinic's sliding glass doors, The midday sun bathes Charlotte and Alexander in warm light, as if the world itself shares their sense of relief. She clings to the ultrasound images, her fingers skimming the edges in gentle reverence. Alexander stands nearby, car keys in hand, a faint smile playing at his lips. "How are you feeling?" he asks, his voice low. He's aware it's a loaded question. He's just shared a moment of profound intimacy with her. Charlotte turns, letting out a soft exhale. Relieved, overjoyed, scared, all at once. She bites her lip, then forces a small laugh. "But mostly, I'm just so grateful. Hearing those heartbeats, seeing them wriggle around." Her voice wavers with emotion. He nods, resisting the urge to place a comforting hand on her shoulder in public. "I can only imagine." Gesturing to the parking lot, he adds, "Let's get you back. Or, if you're hungry, we could grab a quick lunch. Only if you feel up to it." She considers it, pressing a protective hand over her lower abdomen. "A small lunch sounds nice," she admits. "I should probably eat something better than a vending machine snack." Alexander leads the way to his car. Once inside, the ride flows in companionable silence for a few minutes, Charlotte gazing out the window at the passing street scenes. Her mind replays that magical moment in the ultrasound room. She never expected to share such an event with someone who, barely a couple of weeks ago, was a stranger. The closeness that's developed between them feels both comforting and slightly disorienting. They pull into a modest cafe's parking lot, a contrast from the high-end restaurants Alexander often frequents with business partners. He helps her out of the car, a subtle protective air about him that she tries hard not to read into. The cafe bustles with lunchtime chatter, but the two manage to snag a small booth by the window. A waitress drops off laminated menus and glasses of water. Charlotte flips through the menu, her stomach rumbling softly. "I'm starving," she confesses, half embarrassed. "Order anything you like," Alexander assures her. He sets aside his menu, apparently already decided on something simple. She chooses a vegetable soup and a turkey sandwich, while he opts for a grilled chicken salad. Once the waitress heads off, they're left in a quiet bubble amid the buzz of other patrons. "How's work been?" he asks, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "Any issues with the new contract or your supervisor?" She shakes her head. "No issues, it's surprising. People have been really understanding. My supervisor said if I ever felt tired or needed breaks, I just had to say the word." "That's exactly what you deserve," he replies, a note of pride slipping through. She runs her thumb along the condensation on her water glass. "I'm not used to so many open doors. It still feels unreal sometimes, like it could vanish overnight." "It won't," he says firmly. "I'd never let that happen." Her cheeks warm at his decisive tone. Before she can respond, their food arrives, and the moment shifts. She sips her soup, savoring the comforting warmth, and watches Alexander absently push lettuce around in his salad, as if preoccupied with thoughts he hasn't voiced. Eventually, he sets his fork down. "There is something," he starts, eyes flicking up to hers. "A bit of tension with the board. Nothing that changes your benefits or arrangement, I promise," he quickly adds, seeing worry tighten her features. "But there's been chatter. Some members are concerned about me devoting too much personal attention to an employee. They question whether it sets an unmanageable precedent." Charlotte lowers her spoon, the comfort she felt moments ago replaced by a cold wave of guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "I never wanted to cause issues for you." He shakes his head. "You're not causing issues. The board is just cautious. They're fixated on risk management. But this is my company to run, my father's legacy. If I can't help one of my own employees without bureaucratic eyebrows raising, that's on them." She glances away, unsure how to voice her internal tangle of emotions. On one hand, her heart swells at his protectiveness. On the other, she fears the cost he might pay for championing her so publicly. "Still," she murmurs, "I'd hate to see it hurt your reputation, or become a rumor mill. Alexander exhales, briefly drumming his fingers on the table. Honestly, I'm beyond caring what they gossip about. I only mention it so you're not blindsided if you hear people talking. But this is a small hurdle. I've faced far worse in the business realm. She gives a tentative nod, picking at the crust of her sandwich. Understood. I just don't want you to regret stepping in. His eyes soften. I won't. You have my word. They fall into silence, finishing their meals. Somehow, the swirl of background chatter makes their little table feel more private. The tension from the board talk lingers at the periphery, but Charlotte senses Alexander's confidence. That alone reassures her. He's come this far for her, after all. If there's a cost, he's willing to pay it. Back in the car, Alexander drives with sure hands on the steering wheel. Charlotte wonders if he'll drop her off at the office or at her apartment. Her supervisor had said she could take the rest of the day if she wanted. She decides she has no energy left for polishing floors, so she quietly mentions heading home might be best. Alexander nods. Of course, you should rest. Carrying twins is no small task. She smiles faintly. Feels bigger every day. Once they reach her building, he parks along the curb. A pang of reluctance tugs at Charlotte. She's not ready for the day's shared warmth to end. But she knows better than to monopolize his time. Thank you, she says, unbuckling her seatbelt. For the ride, for being with me at the ultrasound, for lunch, just everything. He dips his head, offering her a gentle look that sends a small flutter through her chest. It was my honor to be there, truly. Keep me posted on anything you need, especially after these results. Let me know what the doctor says next. She nods, gathering her purse and the precious ultrasound printouts. Then, surprising even herself, she leans in and places a light, quick kiss on his cheek, a spontaneous gesture of gratitude. The warmth of his skin under her lips lasts a half-second, but it sends her heart racing. She draws back, face flooding with color. Alexander blinks, obviously caught off guard, but he doesn't recoil. Instead, a slow, tender smile emerges. Thank you, he murmurs, not elaborating. His tone conveys more than words could. She slips out of the car, murmuring a shy goodbye. As he pulls away, she stands on the sidewalk, breath unsteady, the ultrasound images clutched in her free hand. She can't quite believe she did that. A simple kiss on the cheek, yet it carries an undertone that might be more than mere gratitude. Back in her apartment, the quiet envelops her. She sets down her bag, carefully pins the new ultrasound images to the fridge with a small magnet, and runs her fingertips along the black and white silhouettes. Her mind replays Alexander's soft expression, the way he'd looked at her with no judgment for that impulsive kiss. Maybe it's just an innocent sign of thanks, she tries to assure herself. But a deeper voice inside suggests something else, that a gentle thread of affection, or at least a powerful closeness, has woven itself between them. She can't deny she's felt it building day by day, and she's not sure how to separate gratitude from something more, nor is she certain she wants to. The next morning, she wakes feeling more rested than usual. Although her back still aches if she stands too long, she's buoyed by the knowledge that the twins are healthy. She texts a brief update to Alexander. Tech confirmed everything looks good. Due date's unchanged, though twins may come earlier. The doc's happy with my progress. He replies immediately, "That's excellent news. So glad to hear it. Take it easy today, okay?" With that, she heads to the office in better spirits. Her supervisor, true to his word, gives her tasks that involve minimal bending, dusting surfaces, refilling supplies in the staff break rooms, efforts that keep her active but not strained. Around midday, though, she senses hushes of conversation near corners. She can't ignore the glances some co-workers cast her way. Two administrative assistants near the printer quickly stop talking when she enters the room, fidgeting with their papers. A maintenance worker she barely knows gives her a thumbs up and a wink as if in solidarity. She suspects it's the rumor mill about Alexander's involvement. "The boss's new favorite," she imagines them saying. "Look how she's got the CEO doting on her." She flushes under their stares, remembering the board's concerns. She tries her best to act natural, but the tension presses on her heart. After her shift, she steps into the elevator with a mild sense of dread. She'd hoped people might quietly accept the situation, but perhaps she was naive. As she passes a group of junior executives in the lobby, one of them mutters something like, "Lucky break, huh?" She pretends not to hear, but it stings. Outside, the sky is overcast, matching her subdued mood. She wonders if she should warn Alexander about the gossip. Then she recalls his calm assurance. "Let them talk. It's my decision." But still, a swirl of guilt and worry churns in her stomach. She doesn't want him dragged through corporate drama because of her. That evening, after a light dinner, she decides to text him. "Hi, Alexander. Just wanted you to know there's been a bit of chatter at the office. Nothing huge, just people whispering about me. I don't want it to cause trouble for you." His reply pings almost instantly. "I've noticed it too. Don't worry. I'm handling it on my end. Focus on your health." Despite his reassurances, she can't help feeling anxious. She doesn't want her life to be some cautionary tale or fodder for rumors about impropriety. Yet each day she grows more grateful, more emotionally tied to this man who's done so much for her. She sits on her couch, hugging a throw pillow, letting the swirl of conflicting emotions wash over her. Hope, fear, gratitude, and that faint, unspoken longing. Eventually, she forces herself to bed, reminding herself that no matter what others say, the truth remains. She's pregnant and alone in a big city, and Alexander's aid has been a lifeline. If gossip is the price for forging a better path for her and the twins, perhaps it's a cost she can learn to bear. The next few days at work confirm the mild tension. She notices the CFO, James Keller, giving her a polite but curt nod in the hallway. A pair of board members pass by while she's cleaning glass doors, pointedly not meeting her eyes. Yet interestingly, many lower-level employees, those who handle admin tasks, data entry, or mail, shoot her encouraging smiles. It's as if they're rooting for her, perhaps because they see something of themselves in her story. Charlotte tries to keep her head down and do her job with quiet dignity. She avoids confronting rumors directly. But one afternoon, while restocking the staff lounge, she overhears two employees discussing her. "Pierce basically took her under his wing. It's not normal," says a clipped female voice. "I heard he's paying for everything. Must be nice to have that advantage." "Come on," replies another voice, exasperated. "She's pregnant and widowed. Maybe he's just being decent." An awkward pause follows. Then the first speaker scoffs. "Sure, but you don't see him doing that for anyone else. I bet there's more to it." Charlotte freezes behind a snack machine, heart pounding. She wants to step out and defend Alexander, to declare that he's just kind, that he expects nothing in return, but her throat tightens. If she emerges, she'll only feed the flames of speculation. She edges away, returning to her supply cart, hands trembling. She wipes her eyes discreetly before continuing her tasks. It stings. She doesn't want to be singled out as some manipulator or an object of special favor. She's never asked for pity, only help during a crisis. Later that day, she gets a text from Alexander. "Are you free this evening? I'd like to discuss something company-related. And maybe talk about a few baby plans?" She reads it twice, her nerves still raw from the lounge overhearing. Finally, she texts back, "Sure, after my shift, let me know where." He suggests a coffee shop near the office, a neutral public spot. She's grateful it's not somewhere lavish. Maybe he senses her desire to keep things low-key. At 6:30, she arrives at the snug cafe, the air scented with roasted beans and pastries. Alexander sits at a corner table, sipping something from a paper cup, eyes flicking to the door until he spots her. She weaves through the small crowd and takes a seat across from him. He offers a kind smile, though lines of tension mar his features. "Thanks for coming." She forces a small laugh. "Thank you for the coffee. I can't seem to get enough these days, decaf, though." He glances at her belly, nodding. "We can't overload you with caffeine. Let's keep the babies safe." The warmth of his tone soothes her, but she can't entirely hide her worry. "You said you wanted to discuss something?" she prompts, trying to hold his gaze. He sets his cup down, sighing. "It's about the rumors. I've heard more of them too. Some board members worry our closeness might compromise my leadership decisions." Her heart stutters. "I'm sorry," she repeats, voice quivering. "I never meant for you to—" "No," he says firmly, leaning in. "Don't apologize. This is on them, not you. They have no proof, no actual policy violation. It's all insinuation." She struggles to voice the deeper fear. "But what if they force you to back away, or if it affects your position?" He meets her eyes, unwavering. "I won't let it. This company, my father built it and I run it. If certain members can't accept compassion, that's their problem. Listen, Charlotte, I told you once I'd protect your job, your housing. That promise stands. Let them gossip. I'm not turning my back on you." The conviction in his voice stirs an unexpected swirl of emotion. She can't deny the relief it brings, the sense of safety that has become so precious. She exhales, shoulders sagging with tension. "Thank you," she manages, tears threatening. "I was so worried they'd push you away." Alexander hesitates, then gently rests a hand atop hers on the table. "I'm here," he repeats softly, "no matter what the rest say." Her breath catches at the contact. The cafe's bustle feels distant, as though they're cocooned in a private moment. Her heartbeats quicken, an echo of what she felt in the ultrasound room or in the car after that fleeting cheek kiss. She knows they're treading a delicate line, colleague, benefactor, friend, something more. But the intangible bond between them is undeniable now, a quiet undercurrent that draws them closer. She turns her hand over, softly lacing her fingers with his for a moment. His gaze flickers with equal parts tenderness and caution. He doesn't pull away, nor does he push forward. They simply share a connection that neither can label but both feel compelled to protect. Finally, Charlotte withdraws her hand, worried about being too public. She glances around to ensure no familiar faces are observing. "I appreciate you trusting me. I just hope none of this backfires on you." He picks up his coffee again, trying to mask the subtle disappointment at the loss of contact. "We'll handle it," he says, "one step at a time. I care more about your well-being than a few raised eyebrows." She lowers her gaze to her cup, the swirl of foam and decaf coffee forming tiny spirals. In the reflection of the cafe lights, she catches her own eyes, seeing both fear and longing. For the first time in months, maybe years, she feels that longing might be for something beyond mere survival. Could it be a chance at genuine companionship? They finish their drinks, conversation drifting to lighter topics, possible baby names, the safe neighborhoods near Pinewood, and the comedic moments Charlotte's encountered while cleaning behind oblivious employees. She laughs, noticing how easily Alexander chuckles along, a side of him that no corporate press release ever captured. When they finally part ways, she can't quite stop herself from glancing back. He's standing by his car, hand raised in a gentle wave, eyes lingering on her with an expression that seems both protective and quietly yearning. In the hush of the evening, Charlotte recognizes she's walked across another invisible threshold. She's no longer merely grateful. She's hoping for something more, something that might be on the edge of blossoming between them. Yet the road ahead is fraught with complexities. A corporate environment full of rumors, a heartbreak she's still healing from, and two babies whose arrival will redefine her entire life. But as she slips into her apartment, flipping on the soft lamp in her living room, she catches sight of the teddy bear, the groceries, the care package. Each small gift testifies to the fact that sometimes hope can surprise you, opening doors you never knew existed. And perhaps in Alexander's unwavering presence she's found more than a benefactor, maybe even a partner in forging a better tomorrow. She gently rests a hand on her belly, whispering to the twins, "We'll see where this leads, won't we?" A faint kick answers as if telling her that new life, be it for the babies or her heart, is unstoppable, fueled by the quiet spark of a destiny she never expected to claim. The days following Charlotte and Alexander's coffee shop meeting felt like a delicate dance, each step measured, each glance charged with a mixture of warmth and caution. At Pierce & Co., Charlotte continued her janitorial tasks, quietly grateful for the flexible hours and supportive co-workers. Alexander, meanwhile, juggled investor calls, board reports, and expansions overseas, all the while keeping an eye on the subtle currents of office chatter. If rumors still circulated, neither Charlotte nor Alexander gave them space to fester. They exchanged the occasional text, brief updates on her condition, or a note about the next doctor's visit. Sometimes they shared lunch in the staff cafeteria, though rarely in direct view of prying eyes. A new equilibrium emerged, one where they maintained a public reserve while in private. An undeniable closeness grew. Late one afternoon, Charlotte found herself in a meeting room on the 10th floor, tidying after a legal seminar, when her phone buzzed. It was Dr. Weber's office, her obstetrician, calling to confirm an earlier date for a routine checkup. She quickly jotted the new appointment details on a spare notepad. As she turned to finish stacking chairs, a wave of dizziness hit her. Her vision blurred slightly, knees weakening beneath her. She steadied herself against a table, heart pounding. She'd skipped breakfast that morning, too busy tackling a spilled coffee incident on the 9th floor. Gritting her teeth, she drew slow breaths until the dizziness receded. It was a frightening reminder. Twins were no small challenge. She needed to be careful. No matter how self-conscious she felt about the special treatment, her body insisted she slow down. She reported the dizzy spell to her supervisor. He promptly called for a relief staffer to handle her tasks, escorting her to the HR lounge so she could sit and drink water. They insisted she wait there until they found Alexander or Karina. Embarrassed though she was, she realized how thoroughly her new contract had changed everything. She was no longer forced to push beyond safe limits to keep her job. Soon Alexander arrived, concern etched across his face. "I heard you felt faint," he said, guiding her to a chair. "Are you all right?" She nodded, cheeks coloring. "I'm okay now, just forgot to eat enough." He exhaled, relief mingling with a mild rebuke. "You must take better care. Let's get you home, or to a doctor if you feel you need it." "I'll be fine," she assured him, "just hungry." But Alexander wasn't taking chances. He offered her an arm and walked her outside, ignoring the curious glances from passing employees. Settling her into his car, he handed her a protein bar from a glove compartment stash. Apparently, he'd started keeping them around in case she needed one. She gave a small laugh at the gesture, even as her eyes stung with tears of gratitude. Within minutes, they arrived at Pinewood Complex. He insisted on accompanying her upstairs, carrying her work bag. When they stepped into her apartment, the comforting hush enveloped them. She sank onto the couch, letting out a shaky sigh. "I'm sorry to drag you from work," she murmured, voice still unsteady. His expression was gentle as he knelt beside her. "Don't apologize. Your health comes first." She nodded, leaning her head back against the cushions. The dizziness had mostly passed, replaced by a tired ache low in her belly. "Sometimes I feel guilty," she whispered, eyes closed. "You have so many responsibilities, yet you keep rescuing me." He hesitated, then rested a light hand on hers. "It's not rescuing, Charlotte. It's supporting. And you're not a burden." The sincerity in his voice wrapped around her heart, soothing the lingering insecurities she couldn't fully banish. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. In that moment, the hush of the apartment felt intimate, a quiet sanctuary away from rumors, corporate politics, and the city's chaos. "Let me make you something to eat," he offered, standing slowly. "Even if it's just a sandwich, you need something steady in your stomach." She almost protested, but the wave of fatigue convinced her otherwise. "All right," she relented softly. Alexander moved to the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge for lettuce, cheese, some sliced turkey. He worked with surprising adeptness. No wasted motions, as though organizing a business deal or signing a contract had honed every aspect of his life into efficient processes. Before long, he returned with a small plate, a simple sandwich, cut into neat halves, and a glass of juice. Charlotte accepted it with a grateful smile, taking slow bites. He sat across from her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, as if ready to help at a moment's notice. "I used to think success was purely about numbers," he admitted quietly. "Revenue streams, stock performance, expansions. But these last few weeks, they've shown me something else. Helping someone in a tangible, personal way, seeing them safe and well, that matters just as much." She looked up, her eyes brimming. "You've changed everything for me, but I never want you to regret it if it impacts your career." He reached for her hand, carefully lacing his fingers with hers. "Let me worry about that. Nothing's more important to me right now than ensuring you're okay. The board doesn't run my life." Her lips parted, the admission stirring a swirl of emotion she could no longer ignore. Gratitude, certainly, but also an affection, a tender longing that went beyond the boundaries of a benefactor or boss. She squeezed his hand gently, the words forming unbidden, "Alexander, I really appreciate you. More than I can say." He held her gaze, something unspoken flickering there. Slowly he exhaled, as if acknowledging the undercurrent between them without naming it. "I know," he whispered. "I appreciate you too." Silence stretched, charged with an intimacy neither seemed prepared to fully explore. Then, as if aware they were treading a precarious line, Alexander cleared his throat. "Let's focus on your health first. The babies need you strong." She offered a tremulous smile, withdrawing her hand to finish her sandwich. Her heart beat unsteady rhythms, reminded of her late husband, of the life she'd lost, and the unfamiliar future unfolding now. She told herself it was enough to hold on to that sense of safety and caring. If there was more, they'd navigate it slowly, respectfully. News of Charlotte's dizzy spell reached certain ears at the office, further fueling conversation about how the CEO had taken her home. Some voices murmured that the rumored romance was now obvious. Others insisted it was merely paternalistic concern. Karina discreetly relayed to Alexander that a board subcommittee member, Ms. Remington, had expressed fresh concerns about over-involvement. Alexander's frustration with these allegations simmered. He'd grown weary of defending basic compassion, but he recognized the potential consequences if malice took root, especially if someone twisted the story into an HR complaint about favoritism or impropriety. He decided to confront it head-on. On a Friday morning, he requested a special meeting with the finance subcommittee and Ms. Remington. They gathered in a conference room, subdued tension crackling in the air. Brantford, a senior board member, cleared his throat. "Mr. Pierce, we hear you want to address the matter of Ms. Charlotte's circumstances directly." "Yes," Alexander replied, voice level but firm. "I've been made aware of ongoing concerns. I respect your roles, but I won't apologize for ensuring an employee under extraordinary duress gets the support she needs." Ms. Remington folded her hands on the table. "No one here disputes Ms. Charlotte's personal tragedy or your right to help. We're concerned about how it appears. Could it undermine the chain of command or create liability if other employees feel overlooked?" Alexander steeled himself, meeting her gaze. "We have procedures to handle requests for assistance. Charlotte's situation was urgent. Her husband's death, her high-risk pregnancy, these justified immediate intervention. I utilized discretionary funds allocated for employee welfare. There's no impropriety. No hidden transactions. Brantford sighed, tapping a pen against his notepad. You must see how unusual this is. Many staff have hardships. They might wonder why Charlotte receives personal involvement from the CEO. Alexander leaned forward, temper held in check by a sense of moral conviction. Then let them wonder. Let them also see that if they face a similar crisis, this company won't abandon them. We claim to value employees as our greatest asset. Shouldn't we exemplify that when it truly counts? A hush followed. Ms. Remington's expression wavered, perhaps caught between corporate caution and empathy. Brantford glanced at the CFO, who shrugged slightly, as if to say the financial impact was minimal. Finally, Ms. Remington relented. We're not here to thwart compassion, Alexander. We simply want reassurance there's no legal risk. So long as HR policies have been followed and no lines are crossed, we can let the matter rest. Alexander nodded, an undercurrent of relief softening his posture. I appreciate that. Thank you. Though not all eyes looked satisfied, they'd agreed to step back. The meeting ended with subdued courtesy. Alexander left the room feeling a measure of triumph, though he understood the tension wouldn't vanish overnight. Over the following weeks, Charlotte's pregnancy advanced, each new ultrasound showing healthy development. She continued working lightly, balancing routine tasks with scheduled breaks. Alexander remained her quiet champion, facilitating doctor visits, gently reminding her to rest, occasionally surprising her with baby items or healthy snacks. The subtle shifting of their bond gained momentum. When they talked, they lingered on personal topics, her childhood memories, his father's legacy, the simple joys or frustrations of daily life. It became more than caretaker and recipient. They were friends, confidants, orbiting a possibility that neither was fully prepared to name. Then, near the start of Charlotte's third trimester, a mild complication arose. Her doctor noted rising blood pressure, a potential warning sign. Worried, Charlotte confided in Alexander. He insisted she take an immediate break from physically demanding tasks, pushing HR to expedite her partial leave. 2 days later, Karina organized a small baby shower in one of the staff lounges. A handful of colleagues and even some board members who'd softened their stance attended. Charlotte felt overwhelmed as gifts piled up. Diapers, baby blankets, a cute double stroller courtesy of the marketing team. She nearly cried when the CFO, James Keller, timidly handed her a small teddy bear wearing a Pierce & Cobra shirt, muttering something about company spirit. Alexander lingered at the edge of the crowd, content to watch the celebration unfold. Their eyes met often, silently acknowledging how far things had come. Later, as the party wound down, he approached with a pastel gift bag containing a pair of matching onesies embroidered with the words, Pierce & Co. Intern, X2. Charlotte burst into laughter, hugging the soft fabric to her chest. After the shower, Alexander walked her down to the lobby. She kept a gentle hand over her growing belly, smiling at him. You've given me so much, she said, voice thick with emotion. I feel like I can face anything now. He touched her elbow. And you've shown me that real leadership isn't about fancy titles. It's about actually caring for people. She gazed up at him, tears glinting at the corners of her eyes. In that public space, they'd always been cautious, but at that moment, she couldn't help stepping closer, letting her hand slip into his. The fleeting hush that enveloped them was a heartbeat away from crossing into a deeper confession. He squeezed her hand softly. You should be resting. Let me drive you home. She nodded, gratitude and a shy, blooming affection swirling together. When the day finally arrived, nearly a month earlier than Charlotte's original due date, the world seemed to spin in a blur. Her water broke at dawn, and she was rushed to the hospital. In labor, she clutched her phone, tears in her eyes as she realized she had no close relatives nearby. Fear nipped at her heart. She was alone. but she wasn't. Within an hour, Alexander appeared, breathless from a hasty drive across the city. The hospital staff, a little surprised, allowed him in once Charlotte confirmed he was her support person. She sobbed with relief when he took her hand, whispering reassurance through each contraction. 12 hours later, 2 squalling, perfect baby girls arrived. The delivery was intense, but complication-free. Charlotte wept as she heard them cry, joy flooding every corner of her exhaustion. Alexander hovered at her side, pale but resolute, eyes shining with awe. They placed the tiny newborns in Charlotte's arms. She gazed at them, overwhelmed by their fragile beauty. 2 identical faces with miniature fists, voices that wailed with the promise of life. She could hardly speak, but she turned her tear-streaked face to Alexander, raw gratitude and something deeper trembling on her lips. He reached out, very gently touching the back of one baby's head, then the other. His voice shook with emotion. "They're miraculous." Charlotte nodded, cradling the babies close. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning not just for his presence now, but for every step that led her here. For the apartment, the paid leave, the unwavering support, the emotional strength he'd lent her. He stroked a thumb across her brow, a tender gesture that spoke volumes. "I wouldn't be anywhere else," he murmured. In that hospital room, beeping monitors, bright fluorescent lights, the lingering hum of medical staff in the hallway, time seemed suspended. Exhaustion tugged at Charlotte, but relief and love buoyed her. She felt Alexander's quiet devotion in every breath. Through half-lidded eyes, she noticed the faint lines of tears on his cheeks. Without words, he leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, an unspoken vow etched in that delicate contact. She closed her eyes, leaning into him. Hours later, well past midnight, Charlotte dozed in and out, lulled by the soft cooing of her newborns in the bassinet. She stirred to find Alexander still in the room, perched in a chair, his jacket draped across him, half asleep but refusing to leave. A surge of gratitude washed through her, followed by a deeper realization that everything had changed. A year ago she had a husband, a quiet life, and a future set in modest expectations. Then tragedy struck, and she thought she'd lost it all. Her sense of stability, her hope. Now, in the aftermath of heartbreak, life had spun her toward this moment. 2 baby girls safely born, and a man who'd stepped out of his high-rise to stand by her through it all. She carefully lifted one of the babies, pressing a kiss to the infant's downy head. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. Across the small hospital room, Alexander stirred, blinking awake. Their eyes met. In that silent exchange, they recognized how far they'd traveled. Through suspicion, rumor, board conflicts, and quiet moments of shared vulnerability. The tension that once existed between them had evolved into trust, something that hinted at more than mere friendship. Charlotte turned her gaze back to her tiny daughter, letting the moment settle. The future still lay unwritten, but it no longer frightened her. She had the support of her new corporate family, her building's safe walls, and above all the unwavering presence of Alexander Pierce, a man who'd shown her that the greatest success wasn't measured in profits, but in compassion. Sensing the shifting energy, Alexander rose, crossing the room in a few soft steps. He placed a warm hand on her shoulder, peering down at the sleeping baby. The hush around them felt sacred. She looked up, tears sparkling. "Meet your little employees," she joked in a hushed voice, referencing his earlier onesie gag. He let out a quiet laugh, heartfelt, the tension draining from his expression. "They have lifetime contracts," he teased back. "No severance required." Her smile wavered with the weight of so many emotions. The faint lines on his face, the humility in his eyes. She understood he felt it too. A new beginning, not just for her or the twins, but for him as well. The overhead lights buzzed softly, and somewhere in the corridor, a cart rattled by. But in that shared space, they found their own peace. The twins, as if sensing the reverence, slept on in contented calm. Alexander leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Rest now. I'll be right here." And Charlotte did. She closed her eyes, letting the swirl of exhaustion and relief carry her into a gentle doze. Yet even in that half-sleep, she felt the shape of his hand intertwined with hers, a silent promise that neither boardroom politics nor the world's judgments could overshadow. For in that tiny hospital room, 2 new lives had entered the world, and alongside them, 2 hearts, once strangers, had found a bond that defied titles and rumor, a bond of shared trials, unwavering empathy, and the quiet thrill of discovering that love, in its most genuine form, can bloom in the unlikeliest of places, even in the shadow of corporate towers and the hush of a wrong restroom. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.